Chapter 42-71. In the blink of an eye, the 10 guards brought by the 2 messengers had turned into 10 corpses in the hall. The beautiful goddess in white, who seemed to be otherworldly, walked to the center of the hall with the handsome and cold young man, ignoring the astonished gazes of the crowd. Looking at her gentle, holy, and elegant temperament, how did she look like a god-king who had just killed a few guards? The 2 messengers, whose faces were full of astonishment, finally came back to their senses. Suddenly, they flew into a rage and pointed at the woman in the white dress and shouted angrily, "You damned bitch, how dare you kill my accompanying guards?" The other messenger also yelled angrily, "Who are you? Why did you ambush this lord's guards?" Before the white-clothed woman could answer, the 2 messengers looked at each other and guessed the answer. They suddenly turned around and looked at the illusory sun sect master with ferocious expressions. They yelled, "It's you. They're from the illusory sun sect. You're the one who arranged all of this. Illusory sun sect master, I didn't think you would still be so stubborn and make such a choice. Do you want to silence us? Ha ha ha. If we don't leave the illusory sun-blessed land alive in 4 hours, the celestial king and Commander Nan Fong will receive the news. Then, the entire illusory sun-blessed land will be destroyed. Everyone in the illusory sun sect will be buried with us." As they yelled these words, the 2 messengers became emotional. Their faces turned red and killing intent surged from their bodies. Before coming to the illusory sun sect, they were already mentally prepared. Once the illusory sun sect chose to resist to the end, they would definitely kill them. However, they always felt that the illusory sun sect wouldn't choose to resist. They would most likely compromise and surrender. However, they didn't think that the worst outcome would still happen. Faced with the 2 messengers' questions, the illusory sun sect master was a little stunned. The 9 elders stared at the white-clothed woman and the cold young man, dumbfounded. When the illusory sun sect master came back to his senses, he couldn't help but spread his hands and smile bitterly. "Messengers, if this lord told you that this lord doesn't know them, would you believe me?" In reality, the illusory sun sect master, the first elder, and the second elder were all stronger. They were all at the 8th level of the God-King realm or above. As soon as they stepped into the meeting hall, they felt that something was wrong. On the surface, the 2 messengers only brought 10 guards into the hall. However, they could vaguely sense that there seemed to be a weak aura hidden among the 10 guards. However, the illusory sun sect master and the 2 elders thought that it was a backup plan left behind by the 2 messengers, so they didn't expose it. In addition, the 2 messengers went straight to the point and issued an ultimatum, which diverted the attention of the illusory sun sect master and the others. However, no one expected that the hidden aura would appear in the end. It was a white-clothed woman and a cold-looking young man. Furthermore, they had instantly killed the messengers' accompanying guards. This was too bizarre. The illusory sun sect had become the scapegoat for no reason at all. Where was the logic? Sure enough, the 2 messengers looked at the illusory sun sect master as if he was an idiot and scolded, "Bullshit. Are you messing with us? Do you think we're fools? Illusory sun sect leader, no matter how much you argue, it's useless. Your illusory sun sect is doomed. And if you want to kill this lord, I'm afraid it won't be that easy." As they spoke, the 2 messengers took out their divine weapons, and their bodies emitted soaring killing intent. "Come. If you want to kill us, then even if we die, we'll drag a few of you down with us." The 2 messengers held their weapons and stood back to back as they stared fiercely at the crowd. Of course, they only appeared to be particularly fierce. In fact, they were already quietly moving, looking for an opportunity to rush out of the hall. Seeing that the 2 sides were about to fight, the illusory sun sect master became anxious. He stared at the white-clothed woman and the cold-looking young man and asked anxiously, "You 2, who exactly are you? When did you enter the hall, and how did you break into our sect's territory?" Regardless of whether the illusory sun sect surrendered or not, he had to figure out the identity of the white-clothed woman and the young man. The illusory sun sect couldn't become the scapegoat for no reason. Unexpectedly, the white-clothed woman didn't give an answer directly. Instead, she said with an indifferent expression, "We are the same as the two of them. We are messengers." Ah! Not only was the illusory sun sect master stunned, but the 9 elders were also puzzled and confused. Whose messengers are you? Whose message are you sending? Even if you're messengers, you can't kill the guards of these 2 messengers. Aren't you framing our illusory sun sect? That's right. If we don't explain this matter clearly today, our illusory sun sect will become the scapegoat. We'll rebel even if we don't want to. The elders all stared at the white-clothed woman and the young man as they questioned one another. Even though he was in the center of a whirlpool and was surrounded by many God King experts, the young man was still calm and cold. The white-clothed woman still had an otherworldly temperament and was as holy as the moon. She said with a calm and gentle voice, "The person who sent us to deliver the message to the illusory sun sect is the one you've been waiting for a long time, the one who can save you all." When everyone heard this, they were instantly dumbfounded, revealing expressions of shock and astonishment. What? The one we've been waiting for a long time, the one who can save us all? Could it be that you're talking about him? Is this true? Are you really talking about that expert? Although the illusory sun sect master and the elders didn't call out that expert's name in tacit agreement, everyone knew the answer in their hearts. Because that answer was the only one. The people of the illusory sun sect knew it, and so did the 2 messengers. The 2 messengers were also stunned. They looked at each other in astonishment and then rushed to the palace gate as fast as they could. They took out their communication jade slips to deliver the message. They weren't in a hurry to break out just now because they wanted to find the right opportunity. But now, they knew the identity of the white-clothed woman and the young man. They knew that they were messengers sent by the Kenshin. They could no longer remain calm. The most important thing right now was that even if they died here, they had to find a way to deliver this top-secret message and report it to the Celestial King. Kenshin was here. He had already arrived at the firmament continent and had begun to act. His messengers had appeared, and their first goal was to save the illusory sun sect. The 2 messengers were very clear that the value of this top-secret message was more important than their lives. As long as they could deliver the message, even if they sacrificed themselves, it would be worth it. However, the white-clothed woman had already expected this result. Before anyone could react, she took out a pair of divine swords and brandished dozens of dazzling sword lights to stop the 2 messengers. Bang bang bang. As a LV7 Divine King, the white-clothed woman had no problem stopping the 2 messengers at the LV6 Divine King realm. With a series of muffled sounds, the sword lights all over the sky exploded into pieces, creating a huge wave in the palace. The 2 messengers were stopped, and their steps to break out of the encirclement stopped. The 2 messengers weren't injured. After being forced back 10 jang, they tried to break out of the encirclement again. At this moment, the illusory sun sect master and the 9 elders finally acted. Chapter 4272. The news of Kenshin's appearance was so shocking that the illusory sun sect master and the 9 elders were all stunned. But they quickly came back to their senses and realized the seriousness of the problem. It didn't matter if the white-clothed woman and youth were real or fake, or if Kenshin had really appeared. They couldn't hesitate now. They had to stop the 2 messengers and prevent them from reporting this news to the Celestial King. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Whoosh 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 whoosh. Streaks of sword light and divine technique light drowned the 2 messengers. At the same time, the Great Elder took the opportunity to cast a spell to open the ceiling array of the Divine Palace. A large array thousands of feet wide lit up and sealed off the entire Divine Palace. The situation in the hall couldn't be seen from the outside. Even if everyone was fighting in the hall, it wouldn't affect the outside. Following a series of dull explosions, turbid five-colored air waves exploded in the hall. The surrounding pillars, tables, chairs, stone carvings, and other objects were all reduced to dust. The entire divine palace shook violently. Several large holes appeared in the roof and large cracks appeared in the walls. After all, the shock waves from the battle of so many God King experts were too terrifying. If they were to exchange a few more blows, the entire divine palace would probably be destroyed. Fortunately, the two messengers were heavily injured. They fell to the ground and spasmed violently with blood spurting out of their orifices. Their communication jade slips were also shattered. They couldn't send messages anymore. In the smoke and dust, several elders rushed up and were about to kill the two messengers on the spot. But the illusory sun sect master was cautious. He waved his hand and stopped the elders. He only let them capture the two messengers and didn't kill them. When the shock waves dissipated and the hall calmed down, the illusory sun sect master carefully sized up the white-clothed woman and the cold youth. He asked solemnly, "May I know the names of the two messengers?" The cold youth hugged a divine sword and didn't speak. The white-clothed woman still had a pure and noble temperament. Her voice was gentle and indifferent as she replied, "Names aren't important. You haven't seen or heard of them anyway. You only need to know that we are here to send messages on behalf of that lord. That's enough." The illusory sun sect master frowned. After hesitating for a moment, he shook his head and said, "I'll speak the truth. Please don't take offense. It's because we can't be sure if you can really represent that lord. That's why I'm asking for your names. If you can't tell me the truth, how can I believe you? As the illusory sun sect master, I have the trust and lives of all disciples. How can I believe you so carelessly? If you have any evidence to prove your identity, that would be for the best. And you will regret it, and..." The other messenger also raised his head unyieldingly and roared with resentment, "Didn't anyone tell you that women are all liars? Lying. Least. If you believe her, the entire illusory sun sect will be buried with her." Illusory sun sect master and the few elders naturally wouldn't believe these two celestial kings' messengers. But the two messengers' words reminded them. Plus the white-clothed woman's mysterious appearance and strange actions, it was indeed hard for them to believe her. Swoosh! At this moment, the handsome young man who had been cold and silent flashed in front of the two messengers. He raised his sword and swung it down. Swoosh! Swoosh! Two sword glints flashed past and the two messengers spat out blood arrows. Two pieces of their tongues fell onto the ground with a plop. They were no longer able to speak rudely and could only make unclear sounds. Noisy. The handsome young man threw these two words coldly. His figure flashed and he returned to the white-clothed woman's back. Earlier when the two messengers spoke rudely and offended his mother, he really wanted to kill the two messengers. But he was just a low-level god king. How could he kill two sixth-stage realm middle-level god kings in seconds? Moreover, those two messengers couldn't be killed by him. They had to be handed over to illusory sun sect's men to kill. Seeing this, illusory sun sect master and the few elders frowned as they took a deep look at the cold young man. Although they were all veteran god kings who had been famous for more than 10,000 years and their cultivations were higher than the young man by 6 to 7 levels. But they could deeply feel that although the young man was only at the second level of the god king realm, he had an innate holiness and nobility. He also had a peerless sharp sword intent. That kind of special temperament, suppression and sword intent was simply amazing. Even a peak god king might not have it. They could all guess that this young man's identity must be extremely honorable. Illusory sun sect master was a 9th stage realm god king and his knowledge was even wider. He thought to himself, such a valiant and special sword intent. There are probably less than 5 people in this world who can master it. At this moment, the amiable-looking white-haired elder stared at the cold young man for a moment. Suddenly, his eyes widened and he gave a cry of surprise. He Seems like him. This was a sentence that came out of nowhere and was a little baffling. But Illusory Sun Sect Master and the 8 elders, as well as the 2 messengers whose tongues were cut out, after observing the cold young man for a while, they instantly understood what he meant. Instantly, everyone's bodies shook as their eyes widened, revealing a shocked, agitated and disbelieving expression. These God King experts were not fools as they immediately guessed that cold young man's identity. Everyone was enlightened as thoughts such as "so it's like this" and "no wonder" flashed past their minds. That cold young man was a rare peerless talent in this world. If he was that Lord's son, then it wasn't strange at all and it could be explained. The main hall was silent as everyone didn't know what to say. The atmosphere was slightly awkward. At this moment, the white-robed woman took out a palm-sized, simple and mysterious token as she waved her hand and threw it in front of Illusory Sun Sect Master. The simple and unadorned black token was made of some unknown material. It actually emitted an icy cold death chi, as well as an incomparably sharp sword intent and a divine aura which could suppress heaven and earth. It was already very rare for 3 completely different auras to condense on a token. More importantly, when the token floated in front of Illusory Sun Sect Master, he actually felt a terrifying heavenly might. The back of the token was engraved with mysterious patterns and patterns. There were no words on the front either. There was only a straight, exquisite and simple divine sword pattern. The white-robed woman only gave Illusory Sun Sect Master 2 breaths of time before she took back the token and asked, "Now, do you have any other questions?" Illusory Sun Sect Master understood, and so did the 9 elders. It was true. Only Lord Kenshin, who was famous throughout the world and whose might shook the entire God realm, could inject these unique auras and powers into a token. With their intelligence and wisdom, they quickly guessed that the drop-dead gorgeous woman in a white dress and the cold young man before them were most likely the relatives of the Lord Sword God. Chapter 4273. In a short period of time, several things had happened, and the impact on everyone was too great. First, they learned of Lord Kenshin's appearance. Then, they learned of the white-clothed woman and the cold youth's identities. Now, the 2 captured messengers' hearts were like dead ashes, and they were filled with despair. As for the Illusory Sun Sect Master and the 9 elders, they experienced the feeling of going from hell to heaven. It was like a dream, and they found it hard to believe. Now that things had come to this, they no longer had any doubts. Intense excitement and surprise filled their minds, causing them to smile from ear to ear. However, the white-clothed woman looked at the Illusory Sun Sect Master and said calmly, "Since there are no more doubts, then it's time for you to show your sincerity." The Illusory Sun Sect Master was stunned. After guessing the white-clothed woman and the cold youth's identities, he and the elders' attitudes clearly became much more respectful. What a joke! Those were Lord Kenshin's wife and son. If they didn't act more respectful and leave a bad impression on Lady Kenshin and Little Kenshin, then they would be finished. Seeing that the Illusory Sun Sect Master didn't react, Ji Wuhan, who was tacitly called Little Kenshin by everyone, said 3 words in an indifferent tone. "Show your sincerity." This time, the Illusory Sun Sect Master and the elders finally understood what the white-clothed woman meant. Everyone looked at the 2 captured messengers with cold and sharp gazes. The 2 messengers weren't stupid. They understood Ji Wuhan's meaning and realized that their time of death had come. The 2 of them struggled with all their might. Since they couldn't speak, they released their soul transmissions and cursed at everyone. "Idiots of the Illusory Sun Sect, you will definitely pay 10 times, 100 times the price. The Celestial King will definitely avenge us. You damned lowly servant, your death is not to be regretted. The Celestial King and the 100,000 soldiers will definitely cut your entire family into pieces." Hearing the 2 messengers insulting the white-clothed woman, the Illusory Sun Sect Master and the elders were filled with indignation and shouted harshly without waiting for Ji Wuhan to speak. "You 2 bastards, how dare you insult? Lord Messenger, I'll kill you right now. Rude bastard, don't be disrespectful to this lord. The illusory sun sect master and several elders had guessed the identity of the white-clothed woman, but since she hadn't pointed it out, they couldn't reveal it. Therefore, the strange term "this Lord Messenger" appeared. The illusory sun sect master had already made up his mind to join the Kenshin clan. He didn't want the two messengers to continue spouting nonsense and offend the Kenshin madam and little Kenshin. Therefore, after he berated them, he decisively slashed out two saber lights with his palm and killed the two messengers cleanly. Swoosh! Swish! Sword light flashed, and the heads of the two messengers were cut in half. Their godheads also collapsed. Blood splashed out, about to scatter across the great earth. The sixth elder was a middle-aged woman with a meticulous mind. She was known for her generosity and gentleness in the illusory sun sect. Seeing the two messengers being killed and a scene of blood splattering everywhere, she hurriedly cast a spell and shot out a golden light to collect the two pools of blood, so as to prevent it from splashing onto the sword god's wife and the little sword god. Even if Madam and little Kenshin weren't so delicate, they wouldn't necessarily care about their clothes being stained with blood. However, this kind of thing really happened, so it wasn't very nice. The sixth elder's small action indeed attracted the attention of Madam Kenshin. She turned her head and looked at her, a hint of gentleness flashing through her clear eyes. It was obvious that Madam Kenshin admired the sixth elder's attentiveness and thoughtfulness. The illusory sun sect master and several elders were secretly happy when they saw this scene. The seventh, eighth, and ninth elders were also quite envious. Sixth elder sister is still the best. The first time we met Madam Kenshin, she was able to obtain Madam Kenshin's approval. Amazing! Soon, the four elders collected the corpses of the two messengers and the 10 guards and took them out of the hall to deal with them. The reason why the guards weren't allowed to come in and the elders dealt with it personally was for the sake of confidentiality. Another 2 elders stayed behind to clean up the battlefield and repair the damaged divine palace. The illusory sun sect master, first elder, and the others personally accompanied Madam Kenshin and little Kenshin as they quietly left the conference hall and headed towards the extremely hidden underground palace. After all, the conference hall was in a mess and really wasn't suitable for receiving guests or discussing important matters. After everyone entered the underground palace, they sat down in a brightly lit, dust-free secret room. There were no guards, servants, or maids here. It could be said to be a place of absolute secrecy. Since there were no outsiders present, they didn't need to be secretive when discussing important matters. They could openly talk about it. The illusory sun sect master and the 3 elders respectfully bowed and formally paid their respects to Madam Kenshin and Ji Wuhan. The 6th elder temporarily acted as a maid and carefully scouted Madam Kenshin and Ji Wuhan, pouring tea and offering fruits to them. After some simple greetings, the illusory sun sect master asked the question that everyone was most concerned about. Lord Messenger, since you were able to enter our sect's territory tonight and help us out in time, you must have understood the situation in advance and know our sect's situation. You and Lord Kenshin should already know that our sect has always maintained a neutral position and hasn't pledged allegiance to Celestial King. After learning that Lord Kenshin is about to arrive and will definitely save the firmament mainland, our sect has been looking forward to it day and night. This subordinate boldly asks, where is the God of Swords at the moment? Has he already arrived at the firmament mainland? This question was very important. Because the illusory sun sect master and the elders were all concerned about one thing. Before the 2 messengers died, they said that Battle General Nan Feng was already rushing towards the illusory sun sect with 10,000 elite soldiers. Battle General Nan Feng would launch an attack in 2 days at the latest. Without Kenshin's help, the illusory sun sect wouldn't be able to hold on for long. The white-clothed woman, Madam Kenshin, was Yun Yao. She guessed that the illusory sun sect master and the others must be very worried and anxious. In order to reassure everyone, she replied with certainty, Lord Kenshin has already arrived at the firmament mainland and has already started planning and taking action. He has already investigated the situation of the firmament mainland. Lord Kenshin already knows about the intentions of the Illusory Sun sect and the other clans and forces, as well as their determination to fight against the Celestial King. Although Lord Kenshin is rushing over, it will still take him 2 days. In order to reassure everyone, Lord Kenshin sent us here in advance to inform everyone of this news. Hearing that Kenshin was rushing over and would arrive in 2 days, the Illusory Sun sect master and the elders finally showed a relieved expression. A huge stone was finally lifted from their hearts. From Madame Kenshin's tone, it seemed that Kenshin was coming alone to support them. However, the Illusory Sun sect master and the elders had almost blind confidence in Kenshin's strength. In their eyes, even if Kenshin was alone, he could still fight against Battle General Nan Fong and the 10,000 soldiers. Of course, this wasn't blind faith and worship. It was a fact that had been tested. Everyone had heard about the process of Kenshin unifying the boundless heaven mainland and the reincarnation island, as well as his illustrious achievements. Chapter 4274. Since Kenshin was about to arrive at Illusory Sun Blessed Land, Illusory Sun sect's leader and several elders were relieved. If Kenshin could arrive before General Nan Fong attacked Illusory Sun Blessed Land, that would be for the best. Even if Kenshin arrived a day or 2 later, it wouldn't be a big problem. No matter how strong General Nan Feng's 10,000 soldiers were, Illusory Sun sect's 10,000 disciples would be able to hold on for a few days. Now that their biggest worry was solved, Illusory Sun sect's leader and several elders were in a very good mood. Next, they eagerly scouted Yun Yao and Ji Wuhan, and tactfully inquired about Sword God's plans in a roundabout manner. Ji Wuhan kept silent as he didn't want to deal with these people. Yun Yao calmly responded to everyone's probing. She had a good grasp of the situation. Not only did she let everyone guess part of Kenshin's plan, but she didn't say too much. She also kept Kenshin a mystery. All in all, Illusory Sun sect's leader and several elders were overjoyed. They felt proud to be the first to join Kenshin's side. They revered Kenshin more and more. They just wanted to see Kenshin in person as soon as possible to express their respect and loyalty. Just like that, after more than 2 hours of conversation, Illusory Sun sect's leader and several elders were completely convinced. They also completely trusted Yun Yao and Kenshin. Even if Yun Yao took out a heavenly oath, Illusory Sun sect's leader would read it aloud. Of course, Yun Yao wouldn't do that for the time being. This was a more sacred and solemn matter. It was better to wait for Ji Tianqing to come and do it himself. What she was going to do next was another more important matter. Illusory Sun sect's leader, I found out that Illusory Sun sect has been in close contact with the other 5 forces. These 6 forces have the intention to resist Celestial King's tyranny and help Kenshin save the people of Firmament Land. Is this true? Illusory Sun sect's leader quickly nodded and said, yes, that's right. Unfortunately, no matter how secretive our actions were, the Celestial King was still aware of it. He used forceful means to suppress us, and even sent a large number of troops to annihilate a force, intending to kill the chicken to warn the monkey. The 5 of us had no choice but to suspend contact and lay low, not daring to show any signs of resistance. But even so, the Celestial King does not intend to let us go. He still wants to force us to submit and surrender. At this point, the leader of the Illusory Sun sect expressed great hatred towards the Celestial King and his lackeys. Of course, he also knew that Mrs. Kenshin was not very interested in these things. She was more interested in information about the other forces. Therefore, he did not express too much emotion and continued, Lord Messenger, although we have not been in contact with the other 4 forces for the past month, we have not been in contact with them. However, their attitude was as firm as ours, and they hated the Celestial King to the core. As long as Lord Kenshin arrived and raised his arm, the other 4 factions would definitely respond immediately. In addition, if you want to know the details of the other four forces, this subordinate will introduce them to you now. Yunyao nodded and said, let's hear it. The illusory sun sect master didn't hide anything. He told Yunyao everything he knew in detail. Yunyao listened quietly and asked a few questions from time to time. The leader of the illusory sun sect also answered truthfully. Just like this, 2 hours later, she had a sufficient understanding of the situation of the other four forces. The leader of the illusory sun sect gave a very detailed introduction. Not only did he introduce the number of people, the scale of the forces, the number of divine king experts, and the number of divine monarch disciples who could participate in the battle. He also introduced the names of the patriarchs, sect masters, and elders of each force clearly, as well as their approximate strength and realm. After Yunyao listened, she expressed her approval of the leader of the illusory sun sect's detailed introduction and said that she would report this matter to Kenshin. What she meant now was that the leader of the illusory sun sect had done a meritorious service. She would let Kenshin know and reward him in the future. The leader of the illusory sun sect was very smart and naturally understood what Yunyao meant. He felt even more grateful and excited. Yunyao thought for a moment and said, illusory sun sect's leader, Lord Kenshin will be arriving soon and will appear soon. The news will also spread. Therefore, the illusory sun sect and the other four forces do not need to be on tenterhooks anymore. Quickly send a message to the other four forces and tell them this news. If possible, ask the leaders of the four forces to come to the illusory sun-blessed land as soon as possible and meet Lord Kenshin personally. The leader of the illusory sun sect had already guessed that Madame Kenshin would make such a request and was mentally prepared, so he agreed without hesitation. However, he hesitated for a moment and asked tentatively, Madam Messenger, should this subordinate contact the leaders of the four forces and reveal some information, or, Yunyao waved her hand and said indifferently, just tell them the truth. There is nothing to hide. This subordinate understands. The leader of the illusory sun sect let out a sigh of relief. After bowing and receiving the order, he was about to leave. Before leaving, he arranged a place for Yunyao and Ji Wuhan to stay. The sixth elder would take the mother and son to a quiet house. In the next few days, the sixth elder would personally accompany Madame Kenshin. The servants who would serve them would also be the most loyal and reliable female disciples. In short, the leader of the illusory sun sect would do his best to take care of Madame Kenshin and little Kenshin. No mistakes could be allowed. This was not only related to his future, but also the survival of the entire illusory sun sect. Not long after, the sixth elder brought Yunyao and Ji Wuhan to a certain residence in the mountains to settle down. This house, which occupied a vast area and had a quiet environment, sat alone on a lonely peak. It was used by the illusory sun sect to entertain important guests. Very few people lived here. The sixth elder stayed with 10 loyal female disciples, waiting for Yunyao's orders at any time. Of course, Yunyao and Ji Wuhan went back to their own secret rooms and meditated to rest. There was nothing for them to say. In a secret room with dim light and abundant divine power, Yunyao took out a communication jade slip and sent a message to Ji Tianqing. Not only did she have to report the good news to Ji Tianqing and tell him that the illusory sun sect had sincerely surrendered to Ji Tianqing, she also had to report the situation of the other four forces to Ji Tianqing. Most importantly, General Nan Feng was leading 10,000 elite soldiers and was on his way to attack the illusory sun-blessed land. This battle would be Ji Tianqing's first battle on the firmament continent. It was of utmost importance. Many people in the firmament continent had heard the legends of Kenshin and knew that Kenshin was very powerful. However, they had only heard about it. No one had seen it with their own eyes. And in this battle, Ji Tianqing would let the people of the illusory sun sect and the firmament continent see that the legends about Kenshin were all true. Kenshin's fame was built from fighting with real swords and real swords. His numerous achievements were forged from blood and fire. He definitely deserved his reputation. Chapter 42-75. This night, many people were destined to be sleepless. For example, the four forces that had been in close contact with the illusory sun sect and wanted to resist the celestial king's rule. Not long ago, they had suddenly received a secret message from the illusory sun sect master. For nearly a month, they had been filled with anxiety and worry. Although they had very little contact with each other, they knew each other's situation. Especially in the past few days, the patriarchs and sect masters of the four forces knew that the illusory sun sect could not hold on. In less than 3 days, news from the illusory sun sect would spread. They could either bow their heads and admit defeat, pledging their loyalty to the celestial king. Or they could rise up and completely fall out with the celestial king and be surrounded by the army. The four patriarchs and sect masters all hoped that the illusory sun sect master could withstand the pressure and not yield to the celestial king. But they could empathize with him and knew how much courage and determination it would take. So, although their hearts were burning with worry, they could not make a decision for the illusory sun sect master. They could only wait anxiously. Just a moment ago, they had suddenly received a secret message from the illusory sun sect master. The moment they received the message jade slip, the four patriarchs and sect masters were stunned. Their expressions became unsightly and their hearts were in their mouths. What did it mean to receive a message from the illusory sun sect master at this time? Had the illusory sun sect master finally made a decision? Had he decided to stubbornly resist to the end, or had he decided to compromise and surrender to the celestial king? The four patriarchs and sect masters were unsure and could not guess the answer. Although they were scattered in different regions and were separated by millions of miles, they had the same feelings and reactions at the same time. Facing the message jade slip from the illusory sun sect master, they all hesitated. After a long silence, they received it and read the contents with their divine senses. Their feelings were very complicated. They wanted to see the answer they wanted, but they were also afraid of seeing the opposite answer. Of course, if the illusory sun sect master really did make the opposite decision, they would not blame or resent him. Because everyone knew that the celestial king was a scourge and they were just a boat in the wild. They could not choose the direction, nor did they have the right to decide whether to advance or retreat. The only thing they could do was go with the flow or perish under the perilous waves. Finally, the voice of the sect master of the illusory sun sect sounded in their minds. After hearing these 2 sentences, their bodies trembled. Their eyes lit up, and the worry and heaviness on their faces were swept away. A moment later, when they finished listening to the contents of the transmission, they were all excited and had an indescribable look of surprise on their faces. Pa! 2 clan leaders jumped to their feet, slapped their jade slips on the table in front of them, and couldn't help but say, "Good," 3 times in a row. The other 2 sect masters and pavilion masters were holding their communication jade slips with both hands, laughing heartily for a long time before stopping. The custodians and elders immediately asked, what kind of news was it that made them so happy? The patriarchs, sect masters, and pavilion masters listened to illusory sun sect masters' orders and naturally wouldn't reveal the secret of Kenshin's arrival. They found some excuses and dismissed the people around them. However, the experts by their side were all their most trusted and valued right-hand men. Naturally, they understood their personalities very well. From their expressions and auras, they could guess that there must be some good news, and it must be related to the illusory sun sect and the celestial king. The patriarchs, sect masters, and pavilion masters hesitated for a moment. After careful consideration, they all sent a reply to illusory sun sect master, saying that they would immediately set off for the illusory sun paradise. Then, the 4 patriarchs, sect masters, and pavilion masters secretly gathered a few confidants to discuss and arrange some things. No one knew what they talked about, but it didn't take long for them to quietly leave the cave residence with 2 custodians or elders. In these 2 days, the firmament land was relatively peaceful. Even in the dark where no one knew, there were undercurrents surging. The common people and many forces were talking about Kenshin. But so far, the firmament land was not in chaos, and no war had broken out. It was just that everyone could sense that a storm was about to come. Everyone believed that war and chaos were not far away. In Tiandu, the celestial king had already received the news. That night, the 2 messengers he sent, with 10 guards, entered the illusory sun paradise to deliver his order, but they never appeared again. No one knew what happened to the 2 messengers after they entered the illusory sun paradise, or what their current situation was. But just as the 2 messengers said, they did not leave the illusory sun paradise before dawn, which meant that something had happened to them. And there was only one answer, that was, the illusory sun sect was going to rebel. So, in the early morning of the 2nd day, the celestial king received the news from the scouts, and he was immediately furious. Although the celestial king was mentally prepared, the tough illusory sun sect might resist to the end. But he was 80% sure that the illusory sun sect would not dare to act rashly and would obediently surrender. But the result was a slap to his face. He was furious, and his killing intent surged. He immediately ordered Battle Marshal Nan Feng. He ordered Battle Marshal Nan Feng to speed up the march, break through the illusory sun paradise as soon as possible, and kill everyone in the illusory sun sect. The reason why he gave such an order was that he was worried that the people of the illusory sun sect would run out of the cave and escape the firmament land. Even if they did not run away, the illusory sun sect would have enough time to breathe, and they could set up more defenses and traps to create trouble for Battle Marshal Nan Feng. Only by ending the battle quickly could he reduce the casualties of the soldiers. Most importantly, the news of the illusory sun sect's rebellion would definitely spread in 2 days. The celestial king wanted those who received the news to hear that the illusory sun sect was going to rebel, and then they would hear the news of the illusory sun sect's destruction. Only then would it have a strong deterrent effect and create a sensation. He wanted everyone in the firmament land to understand that the result of opposing him and not being loyal to him was destruction. At this moment, Battle Marshal Nan Feng was leading 10,000 soldiers on 5 godly ships towards the south at a moderate speed. He had the same idea as the celestial king. He believed that the illusory sun sect had an 80% chance of surrendering, and the chances of them rebelling were very low. The 10,000 soldiers he led were just going through the motions to intimidate the illusory sun sect. They would not be of any use. In his opinion, the fact that he had led 10,000 soldiers to destroy a top force was enough to intimidate the illusory sun sect. As long as the illusory sun sect leader was not crazy, he would not take things too hard. However, when Battle Marshal Nan Feng received the celestial king's order, he was dumbfounded. He never thought that the illusory sun sect would really rebel. Battle Marshal Nan Feng panicked and quickly ordered the fleet to move at full speed. Chapter 4276. Originally, according to the speed of Battle Commander Nan Feng's fleet, they should have reached illusory sun-blessed land in 2 days. However, he had been careless and believed that illusory sun sect would not resist, so the fleet was slower. Even if they rushed at full speed, they would still need 2.5 days to arrive. When he came to this conclusion, Battle Commander Nan Feng felt very uneasy. For others, being half a day later than the time they were ordered wasn't a big deal. However, he knew that the celestial king had always been strict. If he knew that he had been negligent and delayed by half a day, he would definitely be furious. However, things had already happened, and he could not change the outcome. No matter how fast the fleet sped up, they would not be able to reach illusory sun-blessed land in 2 days. Thus, after much consideration, Battle Commander Nan Feng decided to report the truth to the celestial king and ask for punishment. He had served under the celestial king for almost 1,000 years and understood the celestial king's nature very well. He naturally knew that this was the most appropriate thing to do. Furthermore, he was the celestial king's right-hand man and was deeply trusted and valued. Perhaps the Celestial King would forgive him this time on account of his sincerity and their many years of relationship. After sending the message, Battle Commander Nan Feng anxiously waited for the Celestial King's reply. 15 minutes later, the Celestial King's reply arrived. Just as Battle Commander Nan Feng had expected, the Celestial King was very angry and scolded him harshly. However, on account of his sincerity in many years of hard work, he would not be punished for the time being. He had to atone for his crime and completely eliminate everyone in Illusory Sun sect, leaving no one alive. If he could complete the mission perfectly, not only would the Celestial King not punish him, he would also be rewarded according to his merits. After reading the Celestial King's reply, Battle Commander Nan Feng felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. After putting away the communication jade slip, he did not think about anything else and began to prepare his battle plan. His temperament became cold and austere, and his entire body was filled with a frightening killing intent. Bastards of Illusory Sun sect, there is a path to heaven, but you don't want to take it. Since you insist on seeking death, Ben Shui will fulfill your wish. This time, everyone from the Illusionary Sun sect had to die. Even a chicken or a dog won't be able to survive. Commander Nan Feng held his sword and cursed silently in his heart. Ever since Yun Yao arrived and killed the two messengers had been killed. The Illusionary Sun sect had already joined the Kenshin Empire and became the first force under the Kenshin Empire. Of course, the only thing missing was the process of swearing allegiance. However, the Illusory Sun sect master and several elders had already considered themselves Kenshin's subordinates. Of course, this news was still confidential. Other than the sect leader and vice-sect leader, the two protectors, and a few elders, no one else knew about it. The Illusory Sun sect master knew that Kenshin would arrive soon. However, he didn't stay idle. He still had to do the necessary defensive work. Over the past 2 days, he had personally commanded the elders and deacons to lead thousands of disciples to reinforce Illusory Sun blessed land. After reinforcing the entire blessed land's defensive array, he ordered the disciples to set up 2 layers of defensive arrays and 1 layer of sect-protecting array. In addition, he set up a dozen or so arrays near the blessed land's entrance to act as traps and ambushes. After doing all this, the Illusory Sun sect master mobilized the troops and arranged for the elders, deacons, and disciples to set up arrays to firmly guard Illusory Sun blessed land. Even the guards guarding the entrance of the blessed land were withdrawn into the interior of the blessed land. In short, the Illusory Sun sect had finished their preparations and assumed a defensive posture. They were just waiting for Commander Nan Feng to lead his army of 10,000 to attack. The two sides were separated by the Illusory Sun blessed land's array and began to fight. The Illusory Sun sect didn't hope to win this battle. They only hoped to block Commander Nan Feng's attack and minimize their casualties. As long as they waited for Kenshin to arrive, the situation would be set. Just like that, 2 days passed quickly. On the morning of the 3rd day, when dawn was about to arrive, the Illusory Sun sect entered its most tense state. The 5,000 disciples who had the qualifications to participate in the battle were all wearing armor and holding swords. They stood guard at their posts and waited for the battle to begin. The other 3,000 disciples, servants, and workers who didn't have the qualifications to participate were also waiting in the various underground palaces within the sect, worriedly praying. Logically speaking, Commander Nan Feng should have led his army to the Blessed Land's entrance by now. Perhaps in the next moment, the army of 10,000 would attack. Everyone's nerves were tense, and their hearts were in their mouths. The 2 elders and 8 deacons in charge of controlling the defensive array also pushed the defensive power of the array to its limit. Even the Illusory Sun sect master didn't stay within the sect to wait for news. Instead, he brought 2 protectors and personally arrived at the Blessed Land's entrance. The 3 of them stood in the night sky and looked down at the disciples near the entrance, waiting with serious expressions. However, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an entire hour passed, and there was no reaction from the defensive array. Commander Nan Fong and his army of 10,000 didn't appear on time, let alone attack illusory sun-blessed land. The thousands of disciples didn't dare to relax, but they were very confused. Some of the deacons and elders secretly discussed with each other, but they couldn't make up their minds. In the end, they saw the sect master and the two protectors supervising the battle. Two elders flew into the night sky and asked for instructions from the illusory sun sect master. Lord Sect Master, look, it's already been an hour. Why hasn't there been any movement? Lord Sect Master, in order to preserve our strength and reduce casualties, we didn't leave any scouts or spies outside the blessed land. Now that the situation has changed, we can't see what's going on outside. The illusory sun sect master was also puzzled. But in front of thousands of disciples, he couldn't show it. He was still calm and replied indifferently, logically speaking, Commander Nan Fong and his army of 10,000 should have arrived by now. However, Commander Nan Fong has been through hundreds of battles and is very experienced. He isn't an impulsive person, so he definitely won't attack rashly. Of course, he has to observe the situation, arrange the troops, and discuss the attack plan. In this way, it will take at least a few hours before he attacks. When the two elders heard this, they immediately nodded in agreement. But after nodding, the two elders asked again, Sect Master, what should we do then? Let the disciples continue to be vigilant and ready to fight at any time. Sect Master, the disciples have been tense and exhausted. I'm afraid it's not good to continue like this. If Commander Nan Fong is cunning enough and deliberately wastes a day or two of our time, the disciples will be very tired before they even participate in the battle. The illusory sun sect master also realized this problem and nodded slightly. Right now, we are passively defending, and the initiative is in Commander Nan Feng's hands. Pass down the order, tell the disciples not to be too nervous and to remain vigilant. Also, if Commander Nan Fong is stalling for time, that's exactly what I want. The longer we delay, the better it is for us. Chapter 42-77. The thousands of disciples of the illusory sun sect followed the sect master's orders and remained on guard. At the same time, they relaxed a lot. This way, everyone felt much more relaxed. At the very least, they wouldn't expend too much energy. Time slowly passed. Hour after hour passed. The disciples of the illusory sun sect realized that Battle General Nan Fong and his 10,000 soldiers were purposely stalling for time. Since they guessed the other party's scheme, the disciples were certain that they would just have to wait patiently. The elders of the illusory sun sect were even more certain that the sect master's judgment was correct. They also believed the sect master's words. If Battle General Nan Fong wanted to stall for time, then so be it. After all, stalling for time would only benefit the illusory sun sect. If they could stall for 2 days until Kenshin arrived, that would be even better. At that time, the illusory sun sect would not only be able to defend their blessed land, but they would also be able to turn the tables and annihilate Battle General Nan Fong and his 10,000 soldiers. However, while the elders and disciples of the illusory sun sect had a good idea, reality didn't go as they wished. In just half a day, Battle General Nan Feng's fleet arrived at the entrance of the illusory sun-blessed land. Battle General Nan Fong remembered the Celestial King's orders and didn't dare to be negligent. He had already made a mistake once. How could he make the same mistake a second time? After arriving, he didn't hesitate and immediately ordered his 10,000 soldiers to attack. Although the battleships were traveling at full speed, the 10,000 soldiers were resting on the battleships and didn't lose any combat strength. Furthermore, they had already made preparations before arriving at the illusory sun-blessed land. The 5 battleships stopped 1,000 miles away from the blessed land's entrance and got into formation, ready to provide support at any time. The 10,000 soldiers also got into formation and attacked under the command of the god generals. Kill. Charge into the illusory sun-blessed land and kill everyone from the illusory sun sect. Kill them all. Leave no one alive. Kill the traitors. We are invincible. The 20 divine king realm generals all swung their swords and sabers, roaring and shouting. The 10,000 soldiers' blood was ignited. They all roared with killing intent and attacked the entrance of the illusory sun-blessed land. When they reached the entrance of the blessed land, all of them unleashed their full strength and used all kinds of divine abilities. Colorful lights that covered the sky. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Swish. Swish. Divine light flickered all over the sky, and the sharp sound of saber light and sword chi piercing through the air could be heard. Violent gales swept out in all directions, bursting forth with violent airwaves. Everything within a radius of 10,000 miles was swept by the storm. The sea of clouds in the sky dissipated, and countless mountains and forests began to shake. How terrifying was the combined attack of 10,000 soldiers. The overwhelming five-colored torrent slammed into the seemingly empty sky, immediately activating the defensive formation of illusory sun-blessed land, forming a five-colored light barrier that covered the sky. Boom! Amidst the deafening explosion, the huge five-colored light shield trembled violently and flashed with divine light. The first wave of attack from the 10,000 soldiers was also blocked by the defensive formation of illusory sun-blessed land. Countless divine spells were shattered into pieces and scattered in the sky. Everyone understood that the illusory sun sect had closed the entrance to the blessed land. They were planning to hold on until the end. If that was the case, the defensive formation of illusory sun-blessed land would definitely be strengthened to its peak. The first attack of the army naturally could not cause any damage to the formation. In fact, even if the army attacked for half a day, they might not be able to break through the defensive formation. In the minds of the soldiers, if they could break through the formation and enter illusory sun-blessed land within 16 hours, it would be a great achievement. Under normal circumstances, this army would need at least a day to break through the defensive formation of illusory sun-blessed land. After all, the several thousand disciples of the illusory sun sect were not to be trifled with. They would not just sit by and watch the enemy attack. As expected, the first wave of attacks from the 10,000 soldiers caused a huge commotion in the defensive formation of illusory sun-blessed land. The several thousand disciples of the illusory sun sect that had been guarding illusory sun-blessed land were immediately alerted. Everyone quivered and immediately became spirited as they entered a state of battle. It's finally here. Commander Nan Feng is really patient. He waited for half a day before attacking. Brothers, it's time to test us. The deacons and elders immediately became spirited, and their gazes and auras became sharp. Everyone was calm and collected as they quickly and calmly gathered divine power and prepared for battle. Several elders also quickly issued orders, instructing the thousands of disciples to join forces to cast spells, increasing the power of the battle formation and transferring power to the defensive formation. Everyone, listen up. Use all of your strength to channel energy into the defensive formation and block the attack of Commander Nan Feng's army. Everyone, use the battle formation as your team and use all of your strength. Do not let down your guard. Soldiers are trained for 1,000 days to be used in a single moment. The sect has trained everyone for thousands of years. Now that we have reached a moment of life and death, no one is allowed to retreat. Although the disciples of the illusory sun sect and the army under Battle Commander Nan Feng's command were separated by a defensive formation and a barrier of alternate dimensions. Before the formation was broken and the entrance to the blessed land was opened, the two sides would not be able to meet. However, this was still a battle between two armies, and it was a battle to the death. The disciples of the illusory sun sect only wanted to live and protect the foundation of the illusory sun sect. On the other hand, Commander Nan Feng and his army wanted to destroy the illusory sun sect and kill everyone. This was an irreconcilable conflict, and there was still the defensive formation as a buffer. Once Commander Nan Feng's army entered the illusory sun-blessed land, the entire illusory sun sect would be bathed in blood and mountains of corpses. Soon, the several thousand disciples of the illusory sun sect worked together to channel energy into the defensive formation and increase its power. Outside the blessed land, almost 10,000 soldiers launched a second and third wave of attacks with all of their strength. However, they were unable to damage the defensive formation. Not even a crack was left. Commander Nan Feng, who was wearing silver armor and a purple cape, stood in the sky and observed for a moment. Then, he frowned and waved his hand to give an order. Not far behind him, the 5 battleships had been waiting to attack. When they finally saw Commander Nan Feng give the order, the 5 battleships impatiently attacked. They unleashed hundreds of fiery pillars of light toward the entrance of the blessed land. Boom 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 boom. Hundreds of pillars of divine power streaked across the sky like rainbows and slammed into the 5-colored light barrier, causing earth-shattering explosions. The huge defensive light shield was actually shaking violently from the impact. Divine light burst out, and crisp cracking sounds could be heard. Visible to the naked eye, a few fine cracks had appeared on the huge defensive light shield. Even though the cracks on the 5-colored light barrier quickly disappeared and healed, the barrier was still very strong. However, the soldiers saw hope in breaking through the defensive formation. They cheered and attacked even harder. Chapter 4278. The battle had already begun. Even time seemed to slow down. 2 hours finally passed. Battle General Nan Feng didn't attack personally. Instead, he sat in the God battleship and commanded the 10,000 soldiers to attack. The 20 God generals led the 10,000 soldiers and attacked for 2 hours. No one knew how many divine powers they used. The 5 God battleships didn't stop either. They attacked in a rhythmic manner and released more than 100,000 beams of divine power. However, the defensive array of the illusory sun-blessed land kept flashing and shaking violently. Cracks even appeared, but it didn't break. This was within Battle General Nan Feng's expectations. The soldiers didn't panic. They attacked according to plan and were prepared to fight for an entire day. Within the illusory sun-blessed land, the thousands of disciples of the illusory sun sect changed from their initial worry to calmness and calmness. After all, the Azure Sky continent had been peaceful for more than 1,000 years. The disciples of the illusory sun sect didn't have any experience in war. Plus, they were a bit afraid of the famous battle general Nan Feng. Therefore, it was inevitable that they were worried at the beginning. However, as time passed, they calmed down. The defensive array was strong enough. The sect master, protectors, and elders were all present. They had nothing to worry about. Based on the current situation, it wouldn't be a problem to stall for another 2 days. According to the rumors circulating in the sect, a mysterious expert would come to support the illusory sun sect in a day or 2 to fight against Battle General Nan Feng. As long as the mysterious expert arrived, Battle General Nan Feng would definitely lose. Even though the news was ambiguous and no one knew who the mysterious expert was, the disciples of the illusory sun sect were all excited. But when the disciples heard this news, they were all very excited and felt more confident in their hearts. However, the illusory sun sect master wasn't as optimistic as the disciples. Although he didn't say anything, his expression and eyes were serious. The disciples couldn't tell, but he knew. The defensive array of the illusory sun-blessed land was only a king-grade high-grade divine array. Even after being strengthened, it was only close to a king-grade high-grade divine array. It wasn't a true king-grade divine array. Based on the current situation, the defensive formation would most likely be broken in another 14 to 14 hours. When that time came, Battle General Nan Feng would lead 10,000 soldiers into the illusory sun-blessed land. The consequences would be unimaginable. Illusory Sun Sect Master didn't believe that the formations and traps he had set up beforehand would be able to stop Battle Marshal Nan Feng's advance. Once the two sides engaged in close combat, the Illusory Sun Sect would definitely suffer a crushing defeat. After hesitating for a long while, he finally made up his mind. He transmitted his voice to the second guardian beside him and asked, "Send a message to the sixth elder and ask him where Madame Kenshin is now and what's his reaction." The sixth elder was not present at the scene, nor did he participate in the battle. He was still serving Madame Kenshin in the courtyard. When Battle General Nan Feng's army had just launched their attack, the illusory Sun Sect Master had asked the second protector to send a message to the sixth elder. With the sixth elder's intelligence, he would definitely know what it meant. He would definitely let Madame Kenshin know about it as well. The illusory Sun Sect Master wanted to see Madame Kenshin's reaction and what instructions she had. Unfortunately, after 2 hours, Madame Kenshin did not appear, nor did she give him any instructions. How could the illusory Sun Sect Master not be worried and anxious? Therefore, after weighing the pros and cons, he could not help but contact the sixth elder and ask about the situation. The second protector said yes and hurriedly sent a message to the sixth elder. Next, the two could only wait for the sixth elder's reply. At the same time, Yun Yao was currently playing chess with Ji Wuhan under the fire maple tree in the courtyard of her residence. For so many years, Yun Yao had never neglected to teach her children. What she taught was not only the cultivation method of the divine Tao, but also the way of dealing with people and various principles. Just as she had said before, even if Wushuang and Wuhan could not become peak divine kings and reach the top of the world in terms of cultivation, they had to have wisdom and wisdom. They understood the principles of the world and the principles of heaven and earth. Playing chess with Wushuang and Wuhan was actually one of the ways Yunyao taught them. Both mother and son had heaven-defying looks and extraordinary temperaments. They were also holding the black and white chess pieces respectively. They frowned slightly and seemed to be in deep thought. Accompanied by the fire maple leaves gently falling, this scene appeared especially elegant and tranquil. Even the sixth elder, who had been standing on the side and had not dared to disturb them, inexplicably felt calm and relaxed. Although Madame Kenshin's strength was not at the top, only at the 7th level of the Divine King realm, she was on par with her. But for some reason, standing next to Madame Kenshin, she felt that this place was aloof from worldly affairs and was peaceful and worry-free. Even though she knew that General Nan Feng had arrived and the army was attacking illusory sun-blessed land, she still had the illusion that staying next to Madame Kenshin was incomparably safe. At this moment, a spiritual light flew over from the horizon and landed in front of the sixth elder. She reached out and caught the divine light, and a communication jade slip fell into her palm. Seeing the mark on the jade slip, she knew that it was sent by the second protector and must have been instructed by the sect master. Her divine sense entered the jade slip and quickly read the information inside. After reading it, she thought, as expected. The sixth elder silently put away the jade slip, and on the surface, there was no change, pretending that nothing had happened. But in her heart, she was somewhat hesitant and nervous. To be honest, she really could not bear to disturb and destroy such a harmonious and beautiful scene in front of her. But the war was urgent, and the survival of the sect was of the utmost importance. She could not turn a blind eye. Just as she was hesitating and thinking about how to speak, Yin Yao broke the silence first and asked, "Is this a message from your sect master?" Yin Yao's voice was very calm and gentle, and it immediately calmed the sixth elder's heart. She was worried about how to speak, but since Madame Kenshin took the initiative to ask, she answered, yes. Yin Yao did not stop, and continued to play chess. She asked, 2 hours ago, General Nan Feng arrived with the army and launched an attack on illusory sun-blessed land. At this time, your sect master sent a message to ask you. If I'm not wrong, your sect master should be worried that the defensive formation won't be able to hold on for long and will be broken through by the army. He wants you to ask me when Lord Kenshin will arrive, right? Indeed, this was what the second protector had said to the sixth elder in the jade slip. The sixth elder secretly admired Madame Kenshin's insight and thought, but he did not dare to hide it. He quickly nodded and said, Lord Messenger, you're indeed able to foresee things like a god. I can't hide anything from you. At this time, Yin Yao's last white chess piece was placed, ending the chess game that had lasted for several hours. Ji Wuhan stared at the chessboard and pondered for 2 breaths of time. Then, he came to a sudden realization and said with a sigh, Mother played so many chess pieces before, but they were all for the sake of setting up the big picture and condensing the momentum. When the momentum was set, at the final juncture of life and death, this last chess piece would decide the outcome and reverse the situation. Mother is indeed amazing. This child is ashamed of his inferiority. Chapter 42-79. Ji Wuhan was only talking about the chess game. Yin Yao was teaching Ji Wuhan some principles and strategies through this game of chess. When 6th elder heard Ji Wuhan's words, she became pensive and understood the reasoning behind it. She was meticulous and naturally understood that this game of chess between mother and son was actually the answer Madame Kenshin wanted to tell Mirage Sun sect. So many days of planning and preparation had been for the sake of waiting for the final chess piece to decide victory and defeat. That chess piece that could turn the tides and determine victory was undoubtedly Kenshin. Since the game was set and the moment to decide victory and defeat had arrived, Kenshin should be arriving soon. Reality proved that 6th elder's guess was correct. Yin Yao picked up a cup of spirit tea and took a sip before saying, Tell your sect master that Lord Kenshin will arrive within 6 hours. Tell the disciples of Mirage Sun sect to make preparations and join forces with Lord Kenshin. We'll attack from both inside and outside and take advantage of the situation to annihilate Battle General Nan Feng and his troops. 6th elder's spirits shook when she finally received a definite answer. She was filled with joy and anticipation. She hurriedly bowed to Yin Yao to express her obedience and then sent a reply to Second Guardian. Second Guardian also trembled when he received the message. His face was full of joy as he hurriedly reported it to Mirage Sun Sect's sect master. When Mirage Sun Sect's sect master learned that Kenshin would arrive within 4 hours, he immediately let out a sigh of relief. A large stone had been lifted from his heart. He hurriedly ordered the guardians, elders, and deacons to make preparations. As soon as Lord Kenshin arrived and attacked Battle General Nan Feng's army from the outside, all of Mirage Sun Sect's disciples were to charge out bravely and cooperate with Kenshin from both inside and outside. At that time, Battle General Nan Feng's soldiers would be attacked from both inside and outside. They would definitely be routed and completely defeated. This was the first time the people of Mirage Sun sect had seen Kenshin with their own eyes. It was also the first time the two sides worked together to deal with an army of 10,000. Illusory Sun sect master made up his mind. He had to use this opportunity to perform well and leave a good impression on Kenshin. This matter could not be messed up. If Kenshin was disappointed in the Illusory Sun sect, then the Illusory Sun sect would have a hard time in the future. The two guardians, the numerous elders, and the deacons were also in high spirits when they received the order. They were filled with excitement and anticipation. They could empathize with the sect master's feelings and had the same thoughts. Therefore, they were all very active in preparing for the battle. The battle between the two armies was still ongoing. One side was desperately attacking the defensive array, while the other side was casting spells with all their might to increase the defensive array's power. Illusory Sun Blessed Land's defensive formation was stuck in the middle, enduring the fiercest bombardment. Divine light burst out, cracks appeared on its surface, but they were repaired again and again. As the attacks of Battle General Nan Feng's army grew more and more ferocious, the rate at which cracks appeared on the defensive formation grew faster and faster. The self-healing and repairing speed of the formation was gradually unable to keep up with the speed of destruction. More and more cracks appeared on the surface of the formation, and its power was gradually draining away. Even if the disciples of the Illusory Sun sect did their best and poured more divine power into the defensive formation, it would still be difficult to alleviate this situation. There was nothing that could be done. This was an inevitable outcome. Based on the current situation, the defensive formation would probably completely collapse in another 12 to 14 hours. However, the thousands of disciples of the illusory sun sect were not worried about this. They had all received the orders from the deacons. They would only be able to hold on for another 4 hours at most before the mysterious expert's reinforcements arrived. At that time, the mysterious expert would launch a surprise attack from the rear of Battle General Nan Feng's army. They only needed to charge out of the illusory sun-blessed land and coordinate with the mysterious expert to surround Battle General Nan Feng's army. The illusory sun sect only had a few thousand disciples, and their overall strength was weaker than Battle General Nan Feng's army of 10,000. However, when they thought about how they had the help of the mysterious expert and how confident the elders and deacons were, they dispelled their worries. In the eyes of the thousands of disciples, victory would definitely belong to the illusory sun sect as long as they obeyed the deacons' orders. Of course, while they were excited and expectant, many disciples were also very confused. They silently guessed who the mysterious expert was. Unknowingly, 2 hours passed. The defensive formation of the illusory sun-blessed land was already covered in cracks. At this time, the army under Battle General Nan Feng's command sped up their attacks, and their firepower became even fiercer. It was obvious that Battle General Nan Feng was very dissatisfied with the efficiency of the army's attacks after seeing how little they had achieved after attacking for a few hours. Under his orders, the army of 10,000 had no choice but to use all their strength and attack without holding back. At the entrance of the blessed land, everything within 20,000 miles was illuminated by a blinding divine light. A hurricane was blowing between the heavens and the earth, and there were constant shock waves of divine power carrying fragments of divine light that swept in all directions. The surrounding forests had long since disappeared. Even the mountains and rivers had been flattened and turned into yellow sand. Right at this moment, a giant battleship that was still invisible rapidly approached from 100,000 miles away. This mysterious battleship that had come from afar was Ji Tianqing's god-slaying battleship. While he was rushing to the illusory sun-blessed land, he would contact Yunyao every day to learn about the latest situation. When Yunyao told him that Battle General Nan Feng had arrived at the illusory sun-blessed land with 10,000 soldiers and was about to attack, he sped up. The sect master of the illusory sun sect thought that this was the first time he had met him, so he decided to perform well. Ji Tianqing was also thinking that this was his first battle in the firmament continent. He had to win beautifully and brilliantly in order to shock the firmament continent and make a name for himself. In this battle, he had to fight with the strongest, most domineering, most invincible momentum to shock the celestial king and his subordinates. At the same time, it would increase the confidence of the neutral forces on the firmament continent. This would be a great help to him in conquering the firmament continent in the future. It would be difficult for him to achieve such an effect by himself. Even if he could kill Battle General Nan Feng and his Divine King Realm generals, he would not be able to wipe out the 10,000 soldiers. He needed the cooperation of the disciples of the illusory sun sect. The two sides worked together to achieve this result. Therefore, he had to rush to the illusory sun-blessed land as soon as possible to ensure that the disciples of the illusory sun sect would be fine. If he was late, Battle General Nan Feng's army would have already broken through the illusory sun-blessed land and killed many disciples of the illusory sun sect. Then, even if he arrived and helped the illusory sun sect turn the tables and defeat Battle General Nan Feng, the effect would be greatly reduced. Even though he was still 100,000 miles away, Ji Tianqing could see clearly that there was a land covered by divine light in the distance. He could also hear muffled rumbling sounds. He scanned with his divine sense and saw the entrance of the illusory sun-blessed land. Almost 10,000 soldiers formed 5 square formations and were continuously attacking the entrance of the blessed land. There were also 5 divine warships in the sky. They were arranged in a triangle formation and were also releasing fierce and violent light beams to attack the defensive formation of the illusory sun-blessed land. The defensive formation of the illusory sun-blessed land was already full of cracks and holes. The top. Chapter 4280. Although the defensive formation of illusory sun-blessed land would have been destroyed in a few hours. But from the looks of it, Battle Marshal Nan Feng's army had yet to break through the formation, and there were no casualties among the illusory sun sect's disciples. Ji Tianqing let out a sigh of relief and ordered White Dragon to slow down and approach the Blessed Land's entrance. Since the first step of his plan had been realized, the next step was to work with illusory sun sect and destroy Battle Marshal Nan Feng's army. The god-slaying warship that remained invisible stopped 20,000 miles away from Battle Marshal Nan Feng's fleet. White Dragon followed his master's instructions and hovered the warship in the sky, waiting for the right time to attack. His goal was to destroy the 5 battleships as quickly as possible. After all, when the battle started and Battle Marshal Nan Feng's army was defeated, it was very likely that they would escape on the god-slaying warship. It would be very troublesome to chase after them then. If he could destroy the 5 warships before the battle started and cut off Battle Marshal Nan Feng's army's escape route, it would be best. Meanwhile, Ji Tianqing quietly left the god-slaying warship and flew towards Battle Marshal Nan Feng's army. Just like the god-slaying warship, he remained invisible and hid his presence. Battle Marshal Nan Feng's army could not detect him and the warship at all. The only person who could see the god-slaying warship was the 9th-level Divine King Realm Battle Marshal Nan Feng. However, the god-slaying warship was 20,000 miles away from him. Also, Ji Tianqing believed that Battle Marshal Nan Feng's attention would be on the defensive formation of illusory sun-blessed land and would not be on guard against reinforcements. Reality proved that Ji Tianqing's guess was correct. Battle Marshal Nan Feng had never thought that a mysterious expert would come to reinforce illusory sun sect. In his mind, the ones most likely to reinforce illusory sun sect were the other 4 ancient clans and sections. If the 4 forces were to come, they would definitely fly over in a few battleships carrying thousands of disciples in a grandiose manner. With his strength, he would definitely be able to discover the other party from 100,000 miles away. At this time, he saw that his army had not made any progress in attacking illusory sun-blessed land's entrance for several hours. He was slightly anxious and impatient. He wanted to destroy illusory sun sect as quickly as possible to appease the celestial king and reward him. Therefore, he was concentrating on observing the defensive formation, looking for its weak points and loopholes. As long as they could find the flaws in the formation and have the army focus their attacks, they would be able to destroy it in one fell swoop. Ji Tianqing quietly approached Battle Marshal Nan Feng's fleet and secretly released his consciousness to check the situation inside the 5 battleships. Just as he had expected, the 5 battleships only had a few dozen highly skilled martial artists operating the divine warships. The army of 10,000 soldiers had come out in full force and were attacking the defensive formation. The commander of the army was in the battleship at the very front and was focused on studying the defensive array. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing was certain that this was the best time to make a move, so he decisively did 2 things. He took out his communication jade slip and sent a message to Yunyao. When the communication jade slip flew into the sky, it lit up with white light and disappeared in a flash. He then used 100% of his power and used his ultimate divine ability. Swish! Inside the warship, Commander Nan Feng noticed the white light from the communication jade slip. This was unavoidable. Commander Nan Feng was instantly awakened. He instinctively released his consciousness and covered a radius of tens of thousands of miles to check the situation. He did not discover the god-slaying battleship or Ji Tianqing. However, he had a strong premonition that he was in great danger. Out of caution and instinct, he did not hesitate to give the order for the army of 10,000 to stop attacking. He also summoned 20 divine generals to search the surroundings. However, just as he gave the order, Ji Tianqing also used his ultimate divine ability. Sword Rain. Suddenly, 90,000 silver light spots lit up in the sky and poured down like a meteor shower. In the blink of an eye, the 90,000 silver light spots were right in front of them. They had the power to destroy heaven and earth and covered a radius of 20,000 miles. It was only then that the army of 10,000 was awakened. They all stopped attacking and looked up at the sky. When everyone saw clearly that the meteor shower falling from the sky was 90,000 starry giant swords, they all revealed shocked and panicked expressions and eyes. Unfortunately, before Battle Marshal Nan Fong could give the order and before the army of 10,000 could disperse or escape, the sword rain fell from the sky. Boom! 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 In the next instant, the area of 20,000 miles was flooded by the starry giant swords. Countless starry giant swords struck the 5 divine warships and the army of 10,000, creating earth-shattering explosions. The entire area was flooded by starlight. It was chaos. Following the explosion, the 5 divine warships were smashed into the ruins by the starry giant swords. They flashed with divine light and countless pieces of metal flew out. These 5 divine warships were of a higher grade and had powerful defenses. They were not directly destroyed by the starry giant swords, but they were still severely damaged. As for the army of 10,000 divine lords, they were unable to withstand the starry giant swords and suffered heavy casualties. Countless people were smashed into meat paste by the starry giant swords. Blood rained down from the sky. The army screamed in pain. Their dying cries were drowned out by the loud explosions. Commander Nan Fong and the 20 God King generals finally came to their senses. They were shocked and furious. They used all their divine abilities to block the starry giant swords. However, those mid-divine kings and low-divine kings were also injured to varying degrees. When the starry giant swords landed on the ground, they even formed a sword formation that spanned 20,000 miles. Tens of thousands of starry giant swords weaved and weaved, forming a huge sword net. They violently tore apart everything within 20,000 miles. The soldiers who were injured but not dead were all ground to dust by the starry giant swords. At the same time, Bai Long, who had been waiting for this moment, controlled the god-slaying warship to unleash its most powerful cannon fire. 600 terrifying beams of light slammed into the 5 damaged divine warships on the ground. With a loud rumble, the 5 divine warships were blasted to pieces. The ground was littered with wreckage and fragments. The dozens of experts controlling the divine warships were also killed by the god-slaying warship. Those who were lucky enough to survive were ground to dust by the starry giant swords as soon as they crawled out of the wreckage of the divine warships. Just like that, Ji Tianqing destroyed Battle Marshal Nan Feng's 5 divine warships and slaughtered more than 3,000 soldiers with a single divine ability. The Illusory Sun Sect Master, who had been guarding Illusory Sun blessed ground and waiting for Kenshin's arrival, decisively gave the order to attack. The defensive formation that the army had been attacking for several hours had opened by itself. The Illusory Sun Sect Master and the 2 enforcers charged out of Illusory Sun blessed ground. Several thousand Illusory Sun Sect disciples followed behind them as they charged towards Battle Marshal Nan Feng's subordinates. Kill! Charge! It's time to counterattack! The Illusory Sun Sect disciples shouted and roared. They were excited and filled with killing intent. However, when they charged out of Illusory Sun blessed ground and saw the scene in front of them, they were shocked beyond belief. The Apex. Chapter 4281. The area of 20,000 miles around the Blessed Land's entrance had turned into a sea of starlight. Tens of thousands of stellar swords enveloped the area, forming a huge spherical sword net that sealed off the soldiers under Battle General Nan Fong. Countless stellar swords danced in the air like lightning, desperately killing the soldiers under Battle General Nan Fong. The Illusory Sun Sect disciples saw with their own eyes that Divine Lord Realm experts after Divine Lord Realm experts were cut to pieces by the stellar swords. The same thought appeared in the minds of all the Illusory Sun Sect disciples. What kind of sword array is this? Its power is actually so terrifying. Setting up such a powerful sword array must have taken a long time, right? Is this the technique of that mysterious expert? But how did he set up this sword array without being discovered by Battle General Nanfeng? The thousands of disciples were perplexed, feeling that this was too inconceivable. As for the deacons, elders, and protectors of the illusory Sun sect, they were even more shocked and pleasantly surprised. They were Divine King experts, so they naturally knew that although this sword array was an array, it was not the kind that required time to set up. Instead, it was a divine ability, a secret art that could instantly condense into a sword array. In fact, many Divine King experts had grasped similar divine abilities. But such divine abilities had a common problem, which was that they resembled an array, but did not have the power of an array. They were usually just looks. And this huge sword array was clearly not the kind that looked good but was useless. The lethality of this sword array was so terrifying that in just 3 short breaths, it had reduced the number of soldiers under Battle General Nanfeng's command by about 30%. In other words, Lord Kenshin only used this divine ability in secret art to quickly annihilate over 3,000 soldiers. What kind of terrifying technique was this? Before this, they had all heard of the legends of Kenshin, his powerful techniques and sword arts. But their knowledge was limited. It was hard for them to imagine just how powerful Kenshin was. Now that they saw Kenshin annihilating 3,000 divine lords with one move, they finally realized that Kenshin was actually this powerful. It was just too terrifying. While the tens of thousands of stellar swords were still killing the army under Battle General Nanfeng, the thousands of illusory Sun sect disciples could only stop. They could not rashly participate in the battle or they would be affected. Fortunately, after 3 breaths, the tens of thousands of stellar swords disappeared. The incomparably sharp sword intent and the raging strength chi were also slowly dissipating. The illusory Sun sect master finally regained his wits. He waved his hand again and gave the order to attack. The thousands of illusory Sun sect disciples seemed to have woken up from their daze. At this moment, the 6,000 soldiers under General Nanfeng's command had yet to recover from their shock, and their formation was in chaos, calm. However, they had just been crushed by the stellar sword. Most of them were injured and covered in blood. The 20 divine generals could only calm themselves down and order the army to get into formation. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Whoosh 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 whoosh. The thousands of illusory Sun sect disciples had already arrived. They released divine arts that covered the sky and poured down on the army under General Nanfeng's command. The 6,000 army ignored their injuries and got into formation. They were just about to cast their divine arts to meet the enemy. Right at this moment, Ji Tianqing suddenly appeared in the sky, openly showing himself. He looked down at General Nanfeng's army with a cold expression. He used the dragon elephant divine fist with his left hand and the burial of heaven with his right hand, slashing out dozens of sword lights. His appearance stunned the 10,000 people on both sides for a moment. Countless gazes gathered on him. Even Commander Nanfeng frowned and carefully sized him up. The 6,000 army thought, is it this white-robed young man who used the sword array to attack us? Heavens! He's alone, but he can use such a terrifying divine art. Who is he? The thousands of illusory Sun sect disciples thought the same, but they didn't feel fear. Instead, they felt admiration and gratitude toward the white-robed young man. The illusory Sun sect master, the elders, and the deacons all had the same thought when they saw Ji Tianqing's appearance. This is the legendary Kenshin. He is indeed wise, divine, and extraordinary. No wonder little Kenshin looks so similar to him and has such an extraordinary temperament. At this moment, some of the divine generals under General Nanfeng suddenly recognized Ji Tianqing and couldn't help but exclaim. Kenshin! He's Kenshin! Heavens! Why is Kenshin here? When did he come? The divine generals only exclaimed subconsciously, but the 10,000 people on the battlefield were in an uproar. After a short moment of shock, the armies and disciples on both sides burst into different voices. The 6,000 soldiers were in an uproar. They looked at Ji Tianqing with eyes full of fear and shock. The morale they had gathered with great difficulty instantly collapsed. They finally understood why the white-robed young man was able to beat them to such a miserable state with only one divine art. It was because he was the legendary Kenshin. The thousands of disciples of the illusory Sun sect finally understood after hearing the two words, Kenshin. This was the mysterious expert that the sect master and the elders were talking about. All the disciples burst into cheers and applause. Many of them were even shouting the name of the sword god. Their expressions were especially excited and moved. Boom boom boom. At the same time, the mountain-sized dragon-elephant fist shadows and dozens of destructive sword lights landed in the middle of the 6,000 soldiers' formation, creating earth-shattering explosions. Hundreds of soldiers were smashed into meat paste by the dragon-elephant divine fist shadows and cut into pieces by the dozens of sword lights. The snow and corpses that filled the sky woke everyone up. They all realized that this was a critical moment of life and death. How could they be distracted? Thus, the disciples of the illusory Sun sect attacked again. The soldiers under General Nan Feng's command had lost their will to fight. They could only defend themselves while fleeing into the distance. If they were only facing the thousands of disciples of the illusory Sun sect, they still had the confidence to fight. But Kenshin had appeared. Even if Kenshin was alone, he could destroy all of them. Thus, everyone had the thought of running away. They didn't want to continue fighting. Even General Nan Feng was filled with fear and despair after recognizing Kenshin. He knew that he wasn't Kenshin's match. Staying to fight would only lead to death. Thus, he could only order his soldiers to retreat. At the same time, he had to report the news of Kenshin's appearance to the Celestial King immediately. It didn't matter even if he died here. He had to let the Celestial King know immediately so that he could take precautions. Chapter 4282. Commander Nan Feng was still calm and knew the severity of the situation. But unfortunately, Ji Tianqing had been watching him for a long time and guessed what he would do. Commander Nan Feng had just taken out his communication jade slip when a sharp sword light shot down from the sky. It was like a flash of lightning as it attacked his palm. Gotcha! Luckily, Commander Nan Feng was alert and dodged quickly. He was not hit by the sword light and saved his palm. But the communication jade slip in his hand was destroyed by the sword light and exploded into dozens of pieces. Commander Nan Feng broke out in cold sweat. Only now did he know that Kenshin's divine sense had locked onto him. No matter what he did, he would not be able to escape Kenshin's surveillance. This undoubtedly meant that Kenshin would definitely defeat him today. No matter what, he would not be able to escape Kenshin's attack. This feeling of being stabbed in the back made Commander Nan Feng feel extremely pressured. He was panicking and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He gave up on the idea of sending a message to the Celestial King and hurriedly waved his divine sword to join the battle against Illusory Sun Sect Master. Illusory Sun Sect Master and Commander Nan Feng were similar in strength. They were both 9th level Divine King realm. The difference was that Illusory Sun Sect Master was over 20,000 years old. He had cultivated for a very long time and had accumulated a lot of power. On the other hand, Commander Nan Feng was younger with a lifespan of less than 8,000 years. Both of them had different natures and the abilities they cultivated were also different. One was calm and experienced with a long aura like an old turtle. The other was as sharp as a blade. He was aggressive and showed off his ability. The two of them fought in the sky and were evenly matched. It was especially exciting and the victor could not be determined in a short time. Most of the 20 god generals under Commander Nan Feng were intermediate god kings. There were 6 7th heaven realm upper god kings and a few 3rd heaven realm lower god kings. Illusory Sun sect only had 2 guardians and 5 elders who were upper god kings. There were also 2 elders and 6 deacons who were intermediate god kings. As for lower god kings, Illusory Sun sect only had 6. In comparison, Illusory Sun sect's overall strength was slightly weaker. But the previous sword rain had caused Commander Nan Feng's soldiers to suffer heavy casualties. Many of the god generals had also suffered heavy injuries. Hence, both sides' Divine King powerhouses were actually evenly matched when they launched a chaotic battle. The biggest difference between the two sides was the number of soldiers and Illusory Sun sect disciples. Originally, Battle Marshal Nan Feng had 5,000 more soldiers under his command than the Illusory Sun sect. Now, more than 3,000 soldiers were killed by the rain of swords, and more than 1,000 were seriously injured. In addition, when the surviving soldiers knew that the Kenshin was here, they were terrified and their combat strength was greatly reduced. As a result, the soldiers under Commander Nan Feng's command were unable to gain the upper hand and were forced to retreat. Seeing this situation, Commander Nan Feng and his god generals felt despair. At the same time, their fear and respect for Kenshin grew. Look, this is the deterrence of Kenshin. Originally, they had an absolute advantage against the Illusory Sun sect, but because of Kenshin's appearance, it had actually become a disadvantage. Time passed quietly. The army under General Nan Feng's command had been entangled by the disciples of the Illusory Sun sect this entire time. Even their retreat had become extremely slow. After a full 15 minutes, the army had only retreated 1,000 kilometers. In order to retreat 1,000 kilometers, they had paid with the lives of another 3,000 people. Originally, with Kenshin's transcendent status and strength, there was no need for him to personally participate in this chaotic battle. However, in order to end the battle as quickly as possible and reduce the casualties of the Illusory Sun sect, as well as to prevent any accidents from happening and allowing the enemy to escape, he had personally taken action. His left hand unleashed all kinds of divine abilities while his right hand swung the Sword of Burial of Heaven. Sword lights filled the sky as he attacked the enemies in the chaotic battle formation. Almost every time he used a divine ability, he could kill dozens of divine lords under Commander Nan Feng's command. Those elite experts, as long as they encountered his divine ability, were not lucky enough to escape. They were all smashed into pieces and turned into ashes. More than half of the 3,000 people who were killed by his sword. Fortunately, the two sides were engaged in a chaotic battle. Almost 10,000 people were mixed together and it was difficult to distinguish between them. When Ji Tianqing attacked, he had to accurately lock onto the enemy and not accidentally injure the disciples of the Illusory Sun sect. If the two sides were in formation and distance, Ji Tianqing could kill the enemy even faster. Just like before, when he used that sword rain to kill more than 3,000 people in 3 breaths. Inside the Illusory Sun blessed land. In an elegant and unique courtyard, Yun Yao and Ji Wuhan were still playing chess under the fire maple tree. The 6th elder had not left and was still standing at the side. After placing the chess piece, Yun Yao glanced at Ji Wuhan and asked, "Wuhan, although you are very calm and collected, I can still see that you want to go out and participate in the battle, right?" Ji Wuhan's thoughts were seen through by his mother, but he did not feel embarrassed. He nodded very frankly and said, "Mother, although father is very strong and does not fear any expert in the immortal realm, General Nan Feng has 10,000 troops. However, General Nan Feng has 10,000 soldiers under his command, while father is alone. I am still worried. Moreover, I am already a low-level divine king and have mastered many divine abilities and secret techniques. I really want to use this battle to test my combat strength." The 6th elder had long been mentally prepared and knew that the 2 nobles in front of her were the wife and son of Lord Kenshin. However, when she heard the conversation between Ji Wuhan and Yun Yao, she still felt somewhat excited. Of course, she also had the same concerns and worries. She was very worried about the safety of the Illusory Sun sect master, the elders, and the disciples. However, she had a mission and had to serve Madame Kenshin, so she could not leave. Yunyao nodded slightly and said to Ji Wuhan, "Actually, you still don't know your father well enough. You also don't know what I went through with him back then. Therefore, it is normal for you to be worried about his safety. However, I have enough confidence in your father. It is only an army of 10,000, it is just a small matter. Sometimes, your father does not really need our help. What he needs more is for us to be safe and sound. As long as we don't become his weakness, he is invincible." When Yunyao said this, many scenes appeared in her mind. She also recalled the dangers and killings that Ji Tianqing had gone through in order to save her. In fact, she had always known that Ji Tianqing was tough enough, strong enough, and talented enough. However, he had a fatal flaw, which was also his only weakness. That was his family and friends. If the enemy could not deal with him and turned to deal with his family and friends, he would definitely save them at all costs. In this kind of situation, he would not be able to be as calm and restrained as usual, and would often fall into dangerous situations. Ji Wuhan was very smart and immediately understood his mother's meaning. With his strength, if he participated in the battle at the Blessed Land's entrance, any two mid-level divine kings would be able to threaten his life or even capture him. If the enemy used his life as a hostage, his father would definitely be in a very passive position. The Apex. Chapter 4283. Since he understood his mother's intentions, Ji Wuhan was no longer in a hurry. He patiently waited for the good news of his father's triumphant return. The sixth elder looked at Yunyao with bright eyes, looking pensive. No one knew what she was thinking. She seemed to be envious of Madame Kenshin. She was also curious about what Madame Kenshin and Kenshin had gone through back then. It must be a very exciting and legendary story, right? Unknowingly, an hour had passed. Ji Wuhan was somewhat absent-minded at the beginning of this game. His condition wasn't good, so he ended the game early. The result was self-evident. This cold genius lost to his mother as usual. Yunyao put away the chess pieces and slowly stood up. She said, looking at the time, "The battle should be over. Let's go and take a look." Ji Wuhan immediately became spirited. His eyes lit up, and he hurriedly nodded in agreement. Afterward, the mother and son left the house and flew toward the exit of Illusory Sun Paradise. The sixth elder followed closely. His heart was also filled with anticipation. He wanted to see the result of the battle. With Kenshin's help, Illusory Sun sect would definitely win. There was no doubt about it. However, the sixth elder really wanted to know how Illusory Sun sect would win. Beating the enemy until they threw away their armor and fled in a sorry state was also a victory. However, in comparison, it was definitely not as shocking as completely annihilating the enemy. Not a single one escaped. Although the latter victory was very difficult, the sixth elder still had hope. Soon, Yunyao and the other two left Illusory Sun Paradise and arrived at the battlefield. At the entrance of the paradise, everything within a radius of 50,000 miles was in ruins. At a glance, it was all scorched earth and yellow sand. The mountains, rivers, and forests from before had all disappeared. Just as Yunyao expected, the battle on the battlefield had already ended. The result was also just as she said. Kenshin's Illusory Sun sect had won. Looking around, there were at least several thousand people in the ruins. Most of them were dressed in rags and looked rather miserable. If one looked carefully, they would discover that those who had suffered light or heavy injuries and looked very miserable were all Illusory Sun sect disciples. Moreover, everyone was elated, and their spirits were high. Their faces were brimming with pride and a victorious smile. Of the thousands of Illusory Sun sect disciples, some were cleaning up the battlefield, collecting the weapons, armor fragments, and corpses on the ground, some were treating their fellow disciples, and some were treating their wounds. Under the command of more than a dozen deacons, the disciples worked in an orderly manner. In the distant sky, a few elders and 2 protectors of the illusory sun sect, as well as the master of the illusory sun sect, gathered around a white-robed young man. They bowed towards him with smiles on their faces as they chatted about something. The 6th elder looked around the battlefield and only saw his fellow disciples. He didn't find a single enemy. Even General Nan Fong, the strongest of the enemy forces, was nowhere to be seen. This made the 6th elder somewhat puzzled. He thought to himself, the battle ended so quickly. What about General Nan Feng's army? Were they all killed? Or did he run away? With this thought in mind, the 6th elder followed Yun Yao and Ji Wuhan and flew forward. When they approached the master of the illusory sun sect and the elders, the 2nd protector hurriedly transmitted a message to everyone: Madam Kenshin and little Kenshin have arrived. The master of the illusory sun sect and the elders who were flattering and expressing their loyalty to Ji Tianqing hurriedly stopped and turned to look at Yun Yao and the others. Although Yun Yao hadn't revealed her identity before, everyone knew who she was. Seeing her and Ji Wuhan arrive, the master of the illusory sun sect and the elders bowed in unison and said, "Greetings, Lord Messenger." They were also very smart. They paid their respects to the sword god's wife, but did not mention their identities. Yun Yao nodded slightly and raised her hand to indicate that everyone could dispense with the formalities. Then, she walked towards Ji Tianqing. Seeing that Ji Tianqing was safe and sound and that there wasn't even a trace of blood left on his body, she smiled and looked at him with concern. Ji Tianqing didn't say much. He returned her a look that said, "Don't worry, there's no problem." The husband and wife had a tacit understanding. They didn't need to speak at all. They could communicate with their eyes alone. At this moment, the master of the illusory sun sect beckoned to the 6th elder and said, "6th elder, quickly come and greet Lord Kenshin." The 6th elder had been standing behind Yun Yao and Ji Wuhan all this time, sizing up Kenshin rather curiously. When she heard the sect master's call, she hurriedly stepped forward and bowed to Ji Tianqing. She said respectfully, "This subordinate pays her respects to Lord Kenshin." She really wanted to say that Lord Kenshin was even younger and more handsome than she had imagined. It was really unbelievable. However, everyone was present, including Madam Kenshin and little Kenshin, so she didn't dare to say too much. Indeed, in the many rumors in the god realm, Kenshin was decisive, powerful, cold, and merciless. He was an out-and-out god of slaughter. As for his image, most of them described him as fierce, domineering, cold, and so on. This made many people who hadn't seen him before mistakenly think that he was a ferocious-looking person who looked very sinister and cold at first glance. However, in reality, his true appearance was excessively handsome. He had a domineering aura and also a sacred and dignified appearance. He didn't look like an evil and bloodthirsty person at all. At this moment, Ji Wuhan looked around and didn't see Battle General Nan Feng's subordinates. He asked, "Father, where's Battle General Nan Feng's army? Were they all annihilated by you?" Ji Tianqing nodded. The illusory sun sect master hurriedly explained, "Young master, Battle General Nan Feng's army of 10,000, more than 6,000 were killed by Lord Kenshin. It's a pity that you didn't see with your own eyes how terrified and despairing those fellows were when they saw Lord Kenshin appear. Lord Kenshin was simply invincible on the battlefield. He killed the enemy as if he were chopping vegetables." This calm and experienced old sect master's hair was a bit messy, and the bloodstains on his robes had yet to dissipate. However, he didn't care about his image at all and only cared about flattering. In truth, Ji Wuhan wasn't the least bit interested in this old sect master, nor did he want to talk to him. Given his nature, he didn't like this kind of shrewd old fox who took advantage of every opportunity to strike. However, he was more concerned about the results of the battle and couldn't help but ask, "No one escaped, right? What about Battle General Nan Feng? Was he killed as well?" The illusory sun sect master nodded again and said with a beaming smile, "Of course. Battle General Nan Fong might be awe-inspiring and famous, but he didn't even last 3 moves under Lord Kenshin's sword before he was annihilated. Even his godhead shattered." At this point, the illusory sun sect master wasn't deliberately flattering. His tone was filled with heartfelt admiration and reverence. After all, he and Battle General Nan Fong were equal in strength. The two sides had fought for over 1,000 moves without a clear victor. On the other hand, Kenshin had killed Battle General Nan Fong in 3 moves and even shattered his godhead, completely annihilating Battle General Nan Fong. This undoubtedly showed that if Kenshin wanted to kill him, he would only need 3 moves. How could he not be in awe of such an unfathomable expert? End of chapter. Chapter 4284. After getting the answer he wanted, Ji Wuhan didn't say anything else. The two sides exchanged a few words in the sky. Then, the illusory sun sect master and the elders welcomed Ji Tianqing into the illusory sun-blessed land. The cleaning of the battlefield and the aftermath were naturally left to the 2 guardians and the elders. The 2nd and 6th elders accompanied the sect master and Kenshin's family back to the mountain gate of the illusory sun sect. They entered the illusory sun palace and sat down. Inside the majestic palace, the palace was spacious and bright. It was very luxurious. Behind the throne inlaid with divine gold and jade, the wide wall was engraved with the image of a burning sun hanging in the sky. However, the burning sun was somewhat hazy and showed many illusions, which were quite meaningful. After everyone entered the main hall, the illusory sun sect master tactfully took the initiative to invite Ji Tianqing to sit on the main seat. Normally, that was the exclusive throne of the illusory sun sect master. Logically speaking, even if a distinguished guest came, as the host, he should sit on the throne. However, Kenshin was different. The illusory sun sect was about to pledge allegiance to Kenshin. In other words, Kenshin would be the master of this place from now on. It was understandable for him to sit on the throne. Although the illusory sun sect hadn't officially pledged allegiance, the illusory sun sect master and the elders had already regarded themselves as subordinates. After everyone sat down, the 2nd elder ordered the maids to bring spiritual tea and spiritual fruits. Then, the two sides started to talk. Yunyao had already told Ji Tianqing about the illusory sun sect's wishes and the situation of the other 4 forces. However, the illusory sun sect master still had to express to Ji Tianqing that the illusory sun sect was willing to pledge allegiance and help Kenshin eliminate the darkness and save the firmament land. After expressing illusory sun sect's admiration and loyalty to Sword God, illusory sun sect master also praised the other 4 forces, praising them as loyal, righteous, and unyielding. Ji Tianqing knew that although the illusory sun sect and the other 4 forces weren't as exaggerated as the illusory sun sect master said, they were indeed very courageous. Compared to those factions that remained neutral and watched from the sidelines, these 5 factions were indeed trustworthy. As for those who had long been loyal to the Nebula God Emperor and the Celestial King, they were all on Ji Tianqing's list of targets to be eliminated. After the greetings were over, the prelude was laid out, and it was time to get to the main topic. As soon as Ji Tianqing suggested that the illusory sun sect swear allegiance to him, the illusory sun sect master, who had long since been mentally prepared, agreed of his own accord. From the looks of it, he had been waiting for this day for a long time, and even seemed a little impatient. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly in satisfaction, then took out a jade slip and threw it to the illusory sun sect master. In front of everyone, the illusory sun sect master recited a pledge of nearly 1,000 words in a sonorous tone. Although the content of the oath was very strict, it was frightening. However, the illusory sun sect master was already mentally prepared, and he was quite shrewd, so he didn't reveal any abnormalities. The 2nd elder and the 6th elder had long heard of the rumors, and knew that Kenshin's heavenly oath was very terrifying. After hearing the contents of the oath with their own ears, they knew that the rumors were true, and they were sweating for the sect master in their hearts. However, the illusory sun sect master's expression didn't change, and he finished reciting the heavenly oath without stopping. Then, his entire body lit up with a five-colored divine light, and a trace of Tao appeared above his head. In the sky above the illusory sun sect's mountain gate, a deafening roar of thunder resounded. The two elders were astonished by such a strange phenomenon. The illusory sun sect master was enveloped by the vast heavenly might, and he couldn't help but feel fear in his heart. He could clearly feel that after the heavenly oath was made, there seemed to be an eye of the heavens that was constantly monitoring him. This mysterious and terrifying feeling made him respect Kenshin even more. Originally, it wasn't enough for the illusory sun sect master to swear allegiance, and the vice sect master had to swear as well. However, the illusory sun sect had removed the position of vice sect master 10,000 years ago, and there had been no vice sect master since then. Ji Tianqing also couldn't let the two guardians, who were still dealing with the aftermath, rush back to swear allegiance, so he put away the jade slip and ended this matter. A moment later, the thunder in the sky dissipated, and the divine light and Tao around the illusory sun sect master disappeared. His expression returned to normal, and he smiled again, formally bowing to Ji Tianqing as a subordinate. Although swearing allegiance was a little scary, and he was very afraid in his heart. However, after swearing allegiance, the illusory sun sect master was completely at ease, and he no longer felt any pressure. That was because he had already collected information about Kenshin's unification of the boundless heaven continent and reincarnation island. He found a pattern. Whether it was the boundless heaven continent or reincarnation island, the ancient clans that took the lead to swear allegiance to Kenshin would receive Kenshin's trust and respect as long as they performed well. When Kenshin left, he would appoint the clan leader to take control of the continent in his place. Just like the celestial king under the nebula god emperor, they sat on the entire continent and held the power of life and death in their hands. They were incomparably noble. And this was the first time Kenshin had shown himself since coming to the boundless heaven continent. The illusory sun sect also became the first force to swear allegiance to Kenshin. The illusory sun sect master asked himself, whether it was in front of Kenshin's wife or Kenshin, he performed very well. In the future, as long as he didn't make any mistakes, he would definitely receive Kenshin's trust and respect. In the future, when Kenshin unifies the boundless heaven continent and settles the overall situation. Thinking of this, the illusory sun sect master was secretly excited and felt very fortunate. Thinking about it seriously, he seemed to have to thank the celestial king and General Nan Feng. If the celestial king hadn't been so aggressive and General Nan Feng hadn't led the army to attack, Madame Kenshin wouldn't have rushed over, and Kenshin wouldn't have helped. Perhaps, Kenshin would have chosen a clan or force that was closer to him. Next, Ji Tianqing asked the illusory sun sect master when the other four clan leaders, sect masters, and pavilion masters would arrive at the illusory sun blessed land. The illusory sun sect master was a smart person. He immediately understood Kenshin's unspoken words. For the next period of time, Kenshin would stay in the illusory sun sect and wait for the four clan leaders and sect masters to arrive. As the saying goes, the pavilion closest to the water enjoys the moonlight first. This was definitely good news for the illusory sun sect. The illusory sun sect master was even more surprised and quickly answered, "Sir, the distance between the four forces is different. The closest one will arrive in 5 days, and the furthest one will take 10 days. He was very smart. He used distance to distinguish the time, and didn't use fast or slow to describe it. This way, Kenshin wouldn't feel that the leaders of the four forces had different speeds and that their attitudes weren't sincere. Although this was a very small detail that ordinary people wouldn't care about. But when Ji Tianqing noticed this detail and recalled the many scenes after he met the illusory sun sect master, a gratified expression appeared on his face. In all fairness, he didn't dislike the illusory sun sect master, who was a wily old fox that knew when to advance and when to retreat. The most important thing was that the illusory Sun sect master wasn't selfish. He didn't belittle and slander the other forces for the sake of the illusory Sun sect's interests. On the contrary, the illusory Sun sect master would always try his best to protect the other four forces. Whether the illusory Sun sect master was like this or just pretending, this proved that he was worthy of great responsibility. Chapter 4285. After finishing the business, the illusory Sun sect master personally arranged a residence for Ji Tianqing's family. Originally, he had wanted to show his respect and courtesy to Kenshin, so he had prepared the most luxurious palace for them. However, Ji Tianqing said that the residence that the illusory Sun sect master had arranged for Yun Yao and Ji Wuhan was very good, so he also wanted to live in that residence. The illusory Sun sect master tried to persuade him again, but in the end, he still followed Ji Tianqing's wishes and the matter was decided. Then, the sixth elder followed Ji Tianqing's family to the residence to rest. The illusory Sun sect master calmed his excitement and still had to deal with various affairs. From now on, he considered himself the most loyal subordinate of Kenshin's Firmament Continent branch. This was because he was worried that after Kenshin unified the Firmament Continent and left, he would most likely be the one in charge of the Firmament Continent. Therefore, while he was filled with anticipation and pride, he also felt a sense of responsibility and mission. Even when considering matters, he had to be more cautious and comprehensive, so that he could help Kenshin solve his problems. Therefore, the first thing he did was to take out 4 communication jade slips and send messages to the other 4 forces patriarchs, sect masters, and pavilion masters, explaining the situation. There were too many people involved in today's battle, and the situation was too chaotic and complicated. Even though Commander Nan Feng and his 10,000-strong army had been annihilated, not a single person was left alive. However, before the army was destroyed, some soldiers risked their lives to send out messages and spread the news of Kenshin's appearance. He believed that the Celestial King should have received the report by now, and the relevant news would spread within 2 days. In addition, Kenshin had appeared openly in the battle, so he obviously had no intention of hiding his whereabouts or identity. Since that was the case, there was no need to keep it a secret. The illusory Sun sect master directly told the 4 patriarchs, sect masters, and pavilion masters that Lord Kenshin had arrived at the illusory Sun blessed land today and cooperated with the illusory Sun sect to annihilate Commander Nan Feng's troops. Right now, Kenshin has already settled down in the illusory Sun sect. Patriarchs, sect masters, and pavilion masters, please hurry over and don't waste any time. After sending the message, the illusory Sun sect master went to inspect the sect, instructing the elders, deacons, and disciples to carry out various tasks. After all, the battle had just ended, and the battlefield had not been cleaned up yet. It would take time to restore it to its original state. Especially the defensive array of illusory sun-blessed land, which had to be repaired and reinforced, which would take a lot of time and money. The illusory Sun sect master quickly entered a busy state. He focused on arranging the various tasks and personally supervising and inspecting. He couldn't afford to make any mistakes. It couldn't be helped. Kenshin and his family lived in illusory sun-blessed land. Illusory Sun sect master didn't want any accidents to happen, which would affect Kenshin's perception and judgment of him. 6 hours later, the battlefield was cleaned up and all the spoils were collected. The illusory Sun sect master ordered the elders, deacons, and disciples to continue repairing the battlefield. He was preparing to bring the spoils of war to Lord Kenshin. However, he hadn't walked far when he suddenly thought of a problem. These spoils of war had just been collected and were still in a very messy state. They hadn't been sorted out. If he just handed them over to Lord Kenshin, wouldn't that be wasting Lord Kenshin's time to sort them out one by one? As Lord Kenshin's trusted aide, how could he make such a low-level mistake and cause trouble for Lord Kenshin? The starting point of doing things had to be convenient for Lord Kenshin. Thus, the illusory Sun sect master hurriedly summoned 4 deacons to help him sort out the numerous spoils of war. If it was in the past, he would at most instruct the 4 deacons to handle this matter. He definitely wouldn't do it himself. However, it was different now. He had to set a good example. Although this kind of tedious matter was very tiring and mentally taxing. Half a day later, the illusory Sun sect master and the 4 deacons had successfully sorted out the spoils of war and felt a sense of accomplishment. He put the numerous spoils of war into 3 different spatial rings before going to see Kenshin. In the elegant and unique courtyard, the illusory Sun sect master saw Ji Tianqing at the stone table under the tree and presented the 3 spatial rings to him. These 3 spatial rings contained a total of nearly 8 trillion worth of cultivation resources. There were also many strange treasures and divine artifacts whose value was hard to estimate for the time being, so they weren't included. After the illusory Sun sect master presented the spoils of war, he was able to very fluently and accurately report the amounts of various resources. Ji Tianqing was very satisfied with his ability and accepted the spoils of war. Even though he was already rich and didn't lack any cultivation resources, he still accepted the spoils of war. However, he still accepted these spoils of war and prepared to carefully select them. Then, he would take out a portion of cultivation resources to reward the illusory Sun sect. After all, only the illusory Sun sect had participated in this battle, and the illusory Sun sect had paid a certain price for it. The victory was certainly gratifying. If they could receive his praise and rewards, the disciples of the illusory Sun sect would be even happier, and they would worship and trust him even more. This was the simplest way to win people's hearts. It wasn't worth mentioning at all. In the next few days, the illusory Sun sect was calm and peaceful, and the atmosphere was filled with excitement and longing. The disciples who were heavily injured were already in seclusion to heal their wounds. The disciples who were lightly injured and could still move obeyed the orders of the sect master and the elders and carried out various tasks. In just 3 days, the ruins at the entrance of the blessed land were restored to its original state, and the defensive formation was also repaired. At this time, the news that Kenshin had appeared in the firmament continent and led the illusory Sun sect to annihilate Commander Nan Feng's troops had also spread throughout the firmament continent. In the past few months, the seemingly peaceful firmament continent had actually been paying attention and anticipating when Kenshin would arrive and when he would take action. Now, the news finally broke out and immediately spread throughout the firmament continent. Countless experts and forces knew about it. As the news spread rapidly, more and more regions, empires, and civilians received this shocking news. Everyone knew that Kenshin's appearance in the firmament continent was a signal that he was going to take over the firmament continent. Billions of civilians finally received rain after a long drought. The savior and hope they had been waiting for had finally arrived. They were all very excited and excitedly discussed this matter and spread the news. As for the leaders of the regions, empires, and leaders of the top forces, they all had mixed feelings. Everyone was well aware of how powerful General Nan Feng was. Kenshin had just arrived in the firmament continent, and he had already acted so decisively and killed one of the Celestial King's valiant generals. He was extremely aggressive and domineering. This made the nobles and experts worried about what would happen next. At the same time, they began to think and weigh their futures and lives calmly. End of chapter. Chapter 4286. Ji Tianqing stayed in illusory sun-blessed land and waited for the leaders of the other 4 forces to arrive. The news had already spread and was known by countless forces and powerhouses. The attitude and confidence he displayed showed that he was confident that he could defeat Empyrean God King and Firmament Continent. He was exceptionally confident and domineering. Even if his whereabouts were exposed, he was not afraid that the Celestial King would take the opportunity to launch a sneak attack or carry out some other scheme. This also invisibly increased the courage and confidence of the people of the Firmament mainland. This brought a great deal of pressure and worry to the leaders of the nobles and top forces. Although there was no news that the Celestial King had received the news and no one knew how the Celestial King would react. But it didn't take a genius to figure out that the Empyrean God King must have known about this before the news spread. Moreover, with the Celestial King's personality, he would definitely fly into a rage out of humiliation. He would hate the Kenshin to the core, but he would also be worried and fearful. As for what he would do next and how he would react, they could only wait and see. Ji Ku, Ji Wushuang, Chao Qingyu, Bai Feng, Nangong Mihuang and the others were still running around the firmament mainland. They continued to carry out their missions and travel through different regions to investigate and report to Ji Tianqing. Although they were scattered all over the firmament mainland, they received the news almost on the same day that the Kenshin had annihilated Commander Nanfeng's troops. When they heard the good news, they felt proud and optimistic about the upcoming situation. Originally, they thought that the Kenshin had already revealed their whereabouts. Next, the Kenshin would definitely summon them to illusory sun-blessed land to carry out the subsequent missions and battles. However, to their surprise, the Kenshin did not summon them back. Instead, he sent them a message and asked them to gather in groups of 2s and 3s. If they gathered together, their combat power would undoubtedly be stronger and their safety would be guaranteed. The smarter ones understood that the Kenshin probably had a new mission for them. Sure enough, 3 days later, when they all gathered together and formed 8 teams, Ji Tianqing issued a new order. Not only did they have to investigate the various regions, but they also had to do something more important. That was to sneak into the domain chief's manor. If the domain chief was present, they would capture him and force him to swear a simplified version of the heavenly oath to pledge loyalty to Kenshin. If the domain chief was not present, they would have to find ways to destroy the domain chief's manor and create chaos and conflict. In short, the Kenshin had already publicly announced their whereabouts and declared war on the Celestial King. There was no way they would give the Celestial King a breather and allow him to deal with the situation calmly. Letting his followers go around subduing the area masters who were left behind to guard the area and destroy the areas where there was no power. Although this could not directly harm the Celestial King's power, it could still play a role in restraining him. After Ji Ku and his followers received the order, they quickly took action. Every few days, the 8 small groups of followers would frequently send back news of victory. In various regions of the firmament mainland, area masters who were left behind to guard the area were constantly subdued and forced to swear allegiance to the Kenshin. More news of victory was that the domain chief's manor had been stirred up into a mess by his followers with all kinds of tricks. When the area masters who stayed in Heaven Capital received the news that there was a big problem in their home base, they were all flustered and worried like ants on a hot pan. There was no other way. This was the common problem of every area master. They had to be loyal to the Celestial King and carry out the Celestial King's orders, but they were more concerned about their own territories and cave residences. Hearing the bad news, every day there would be area masters who could not keep their cool and went to ask the Celestial King for instructions. Although those anxious area masters were eventually suppressed by the Celestial King and could only stay in Heaven Capital obediently. However, the Celestial King was distracted and wasted a lot of time. His mood also became more irritable. Those area masters who were forcibly suppressed and forced back did not dare to resist on the surface, but they were resentful in their hearts. In the eyes of some area masters, the Celestial King only cared about the safety of himself and Heaven Capital, and did not care about their territories and foundations at all. What's more, it was inferred that the Celestial King's attitude was to use them as cannon fodder. The discord between the ruler and his subjects was happening, but the Celestial King did not care about it. He gathered many trusted generals and military counselors to discuss and study various countermeasures. He also had to arrange the troops and make various deployments as soon as possible. In short, Empyrean God King and his subordinates felt a great deal of pressure. However, they did not dare to act rashly. The safest way was to strengthen the defense and see what Kenshin's next plan was. Of course, some young and aggressive generals did not agree with the Celestial King's decision and raised objections. They thought that Kenshin had just arrived in the firmament mainland. Although he had killed General Nan Feng and 10,000 troops in the first battle, which had greatly increased his reputation, his foundation was still weak. Currently, he had only subdued the Fantasy Sun sect and did not have any other forces to support him. They suggested to the Celestial King that they must use this opportunity to besiege Kenshin and the Fantasy Sun sect. They must nip the crisis in the bud before Kenshin's forces were formed. Only then would they have a chance of survival. If they waited for Kenshin to subdue the various ancient clans and top forces, and when he had more and more elite soldiers under his command, they would definitely lose. Logically speaking, these young generals' ideas were not wrong. Their suggestions were reasonable and had the conditions to be implemented. How could the Celestial King not understand this logic and had not thought of such a plan? However, the biggest problem with this proposal was that it was too radical and too risky. This was equivalent to the Celestial King using all his forces to fight Kenshin as soon as Kenshin appeared in the firmament mainland. This battle would determine victory and defeat, as well as life and death. Although the Celestial King's side had an absolute advantage and had a high chance of winning. However, their opponent was Kenshin, a guy who was good at creating miracles and was unfathomably powerful. The Celestial King had no confidence that he could kill Kenshin in a decisive battle. If he used all his forces and only eradicated the Fantasy Sun sect, but failed to kill Kenshin, or let Kenshin escape, the consequences would be unimaginable. What if Kenshin did not fight him head-on, but used his super strength to assassinate his generals and experts one by one? Then he could only hide in Heaven Capital, and the entire firmament mainland would fall into chaos and collapse. When the Celestial King told the young generals this reason, they all fell silent. There were still some who did not give up and continued to persuade him that they did not need to go all out. They could send half of their forces to besiege Kenshin and the Fantasy Sun sect, and leave the other half to guard Heaven Capital. This proposal immediately caused many generals to roll their eyes. The Celestial King was so angry that he sneered and said with a dark face, "Even if we use all our forces, we may not be able to kill Kenshin, let alone half of our forces." End of chapter. Chapter 4287. It was obvious that the Celestial King was responsible for the safety of the entire firmament land. He could not take the risk. To be safe, he decided to strengthen the defense of Heaven Capital and wait for Kenshin's next move. Even when he received reports from various sources that the Sword God was recruiting troops and buying horses, gathering subordinates everywhere to build his own forces, he could only ignore it. Because he knew that even if he destroyed all the forces under Kenshin, as long as Kenshin was not killed, everything would be in vain. The only way to defeat Kenshin was to kill Kenshin. When the young generals heard the Celestial King's decision, no matter how unwilling they were, they could only swallow it and bow to show that they would follow the order. Fortunately, the Celestial King was not someone who would swallow his anger. The death of General Nan Feng and his 10,000 troops was a big blow to him. It was also a slap to his face by Kenshin, causing his reputation to fall. Even though he did not dare to mobilize his forces to attack the Fantasy Sun sect directly and start a decisive battle with Kenshin, he still decided to fight back. Spies had heard that the leaders, masters, and cabinet masters of the other four forces were rushing to the Fantasy Sun blessed land to meet with Kenshin. Obviously, the four forces, like the Fantasy Sun sect, could not wait to join Kenshin. Since that was the case, how could the Celestial King let them go? He had to take advantage of the fact that the four leaders, masters, and cabinet masters were not around and send a large number of troops to attack the Fantasy Sun blessed land. Therefore, the Celestial King chose 8 powerful heavenly generals on the spot. Each of them led 30 immortal kings and 9,000 elite soldiers to attack the four forces. Among the 8 heavenly generals who were named, 5 of them were the young generals who made the suggestion just now. They were depressed and thought that there was no war to fight and they could only stay in heaven capital. Now that they suddenly received the celestial king's order, they were full of joy and agreed without hesitation. They were very excited and full of expectations. After bowing to the celestial king and acknowledging his command, they left the great council hall and went to prepare for battle. Since it was a sneak attack, the 8 god generals had split into 4 groups. Naturally, they had to take the divine battleships and rush to the 4 factions. From the moment they left Tiandu, they had to hide their whereabouts and news and quietly rush to their destination. Even if they arrived at their destination, they couldn't directly launch an attack and forcefully break into the cave abodes of the various forces. They also had to use some schemes and tricks according to the actual situation, trying their best to catch all the targets in one fell swoop without anyone noticing. Even though this was a temporary order from the celestial king, the 8 heavenly generals had yet to come up with a plan. However, it would still take them a few days to reach their destination, which was enough time for them to slowly come up with a plan. A day later, the patriarch of the ancient clan closest to the illusory sun sect arrived at illusory sun blessed land with 2 elders. The bearded man who had rushed over in a hurry was the clan leader of the Li clan, Li Yuan, ILV9 Divine King Realm Expert. The 2 elders who followed him to illusory sun blessed land were the 2nd elder and the 3rd elder. Their status and strength were not ordinary. Li Yuan brought the 2 elders and rushed to meet Kenshin in such a hurry. It was enough to see his sincerity in pledging his loyalty. When Li Yuan and the 2 elders entered illusory sun blessed land, they were personally received by the illusory sun sect master. Li Yuan and the illusory sun sect master had known each other for 10,000 years and had a good relationship. The 2 exchanged greetings for a while. Li Yuan didn't even take a sip of tea and directly stated his purpose of coming. He wanted to meet Kenshin as soon as possible. The illusory sun sect master naturally understood his feelings. He also hoped that Li Yuan could represent the Li clan and submit to Kenshin as soon as possible. However, the illusory sun sect master had carefully studied Kenshin's deeds during this period. Especially the process of Kenshin conquering the boundless heaven continent and reincarnation island 2 years ago, he had carefully studied it. With his meticulousness and caution, it wasn't difficult to find a pattern. Whenever Kenshin conquered the leaders of several factions at the same time, he would never meet with one of them alone. Kenshin would always wait until all the factions that he wanted to pledge his loyalty to arrived before meeting them together and carrying out the ceremony of swearing allegiance. From this detail, the illusory sun sect master saw Kenshin's breadth of mind and fairness. He was deeply impressed. At the same time, he also understood that this was one of Kenshin's charms. Perhaps the leaders of many forces would admire and worship the sword god even more because of this. Thus, when Li Yuan mentioned that he wanted to meet Kenshin, the illusory sun sect master immediately became vigilant. He definitely couldn't agree to Li Yuan's request. He immediately brought Li Yuan to meet Kenshin. Kenshin most likely wouldn't meet Li Yuan and would have a bad impression of him. Thus, the illusory sun sect master patiently persuaded Li Yuan to stay in illusory sun blessed land and wait patiently for a few days. At the very least, it would be fairer for everyone to meet when the other 3 patriarchs, sect masters, and pavilion masters arrived. Otherwise, if Li Yuan met Kenshin first, the other 3 leaders would definitely have a knot in their hearts even if they didn't say anything. They might guess that Li Yuan had negotiated some conditions with Kenshin and asked for some benefits. The illusory sun sect master used a more tactful tone to explain this to Li Yuan. However, Li Yuan was a boorish person who wasn't good at scheming. He didn't listen to the illusory sun sect master's advice and felt it was very strange. He asked illusory sun sect master, "I came all the way here and have already arrived at illusory sun blessed land. You still want me to stay here and pay a visit to Lord Kenshin in a few days? Lord Kenshin is clearly in your sect. Even if I shout, he'll be alerted." Aren't you wasting time? Besides, we're all the same. We just want to swear allegiance to Lord Kenshin as soon as possible. When did we think about negotiating conditions or asking for benefits? Those people on the Boundless Heaven continent and Reincarnation Island who are loyal to Lord Kenshin, have they been treated badly? Li Yuan's words refuted the Illusory Sun Sect Master speechlessly. In the end, the Illusory Sun Sect Master couldn't stand Li Yuan's coaxing and pestering. He was also worried that this brainless guy would really run to the sect and shout, disturbing Kenshin. In that case, not only would Li Yuan be unlucky, but he would also be implicated. In desperation, the Illusory Sun Sect Master could only calm Li Yuan down and say that this matter couldn't be reckless. He asked Li Yuan to wait patiently for a while. He would personally ask Kenshin for instructions and see what Kenshin would say. Since it was up to Kenshin to decide whether to meet or not, Li Yuan had nothing to say. He could only nod in agreement and sit in the main hall, drinking tea and waiting. The Illusory Sun Sect Master walked out of the main hall with a wry smile and personally rushed to Kenshin's residence to report the situation. This wasn't his original intention. It was all forced by that boorish Li Yuan. He was already mentally prepared to be reprimanded by Kenshin or punished by Kenshin. Chapter 4288. Illusory Sun Sect, on top of a lonely peak, in a simple and elegant courtyard. Sixth Elder personally came to Kenshin and Madame Kenshin's room. Her expression and eyes were a little nervous, and her posture was cautious. Although she didn't know what Lord Kenshin and Madame were doing in the room without showing up for a few days. But she thought that it definitely had nothing to do with what mortals were thinking. Kenshin and his wife were definitely cultivating. Even if they weren't cultivating, they were most likely discussing the Tao. Now wasn't the time to think about this. Sixth Elder calmed her mind and took a deep breath. Only then did she muster up the courage to shout, "Lord Kenshin, our sect master has something to discuss with you." After shouting, she quietly stood outside the door, anxiously waiting for Kenshin's response. Although the sect master didn't say why he was looking for Kenshin. But after observing the sect master's expression, she also felt that disturbing Kenshin at this time was likely to offend Kenshin and his wife. However, the sect master's orders were hard to disobey. Even if Kenshin angrily scolded her, she could only accept it. 3 short breaths of time, but it felt as long as 6 hours. Finally, Kenshin's voice came from the room. It was calm and gentle, instantly making Sixth Elder's hanging heart fall back into her stomach. "Let him wait in the study." Sixth Elder was full of joy. She hurriedly said yes, then turned and left to report the result to the sect master. Illusory Sun Sect's sect master was secretly relieved when he learned that Kenshin was willing to see him. Although letting Li Yuan meet Kenshin might not necessarily get Kenshin's permission. But for now, it seemed that he had taken the first step to success. Feeling nervous and expectant, Illusory Sun Sect's sect master went to the study to wait. Not long after, Kenshin, dressed in a white robe and wearing a jade crown, entered the study. Illusory Sun Sect's sect master hurriedly stood up and bowed. Kenshin waved his hand, indicating that he didn't need to be so polite, and sat down on the armchair. "You came to see this seat at this time because the leaders of the 4 factions have arrived?" Ji Tianqing didn't waste any time and went straight to the point with his question. The master of the Illusory Sun Sect quivered and hurriedly bowed, saying, "My lord is wise." "That is indeed the case." Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and said, "The closest tribe to this place is the Li clan. Their leader is called Li Yuan, right? If I remember correctly, Li Yuan's personality is rather boorish and straightforward. Did he ask you to find me so that you can see me as soon as possible?" Hearing Ji Tianqing's words, Illusory Sun Sect Master was quite impressed in his heart and hurriedly nodded and said, "Your Excellency, the situation is exactly so. That Li Yuan is impatient and straightforward, but he is not a bad person. Please don't blame him, my lord. Illusory Sun sect master admired Kenshin's deduction ability, but he couldn't tell what the other party's attitude was, so he defended Li Yuan. This way, even if Kenshin was angry and wanted to reprimand or scold Li Yuan, it should be a little lighter. Unexpectedly, Kenshin didn't frown, show an unhappy expression, and then reprimand him as Illusory Sun sect master had predicted. Kenshin just raised his eyebrows, thought for a moment, and then nodded. Okay, bring him to see me. Ji Tianqing's expression was indifferent as he said this in a calm tone. Illusory Sun sect master was stunned on the spot, a little dumbfounded, thinking that he had misheard. He couldn't believe that not only was Kenshin not angry, but he also agreed to Li Yuan's request. This wasn't right. When Kenshin subdued the boundless heaven continent and reincarnation island, didn't he meet with many leaders at the same time? He knew that the patriarchs, sect masters, and pavilion masters of the other three forces would arrive one after another in the next few days. How could he meet with Li Yuan first? For a moment, Illusory Sun sect master was stunned on the spot and lost his mind. He suddenly found that the rules he discovered from carefully studying Kenshin's deeds and those details seemed to be useless. Kenshin's style of doing things really made people unable to fathom. At this time, Ji Tianqing saw that Illusory Sun sect master was stunned. He raised his eyebrows and asked, "Is there a problem?" Only then did Illusory Sun sect master come back to his senses and hurriedly shook his head and said, "No. Of course there's no problem. This subordinate is just happy for Li Yuan. Many thanks, Your Excellency." With Ji Tianqing's wisdom, how could he possibly not see through Illusory Sun sect master's abnormality? He immediately guessed Illusory Sun sect master's thoughts. A hint of a smile appeared at the corners of his mouth and he asked, "Do you feel very surprised, very surprised? You originally thought that this seat won't meet Li Yuan today and will definitely wait until the other three patriarchs, sect masters, and pavilion masters all arrive, then meet them together. Just like how this seat subdued the boundless heaven continent and reincarnation island previously. Only this way of doing things appears fair and just." Illusory Sun sect master's thoughts were completely guessed by Ji Tianqing. This made Illusory Sun sect master more and more shocked. At the same time, he was also somewhat ashamed and could only smile embarrassedly. "Your Excellency's wisdom is as deep as the sea and as deep as the sea. This subordinate really admires you." Ji Tianqing's smile was still at the corner of his mouth. He continued to ask, "Do you not understand why this seat changed the previous rules and is willing to meet Li Yuan?" Illusory Sun sect master did have this question, but if Kenshin didn't say it out loud, he wouldn't ask rashly. He would only ponder about it in private. Since Kenshin took the initiative to ask, he certainly couldn't deny it. He smiled and said, "This subordinate is slow-witted. Please enlighten me, Your Excellency." Ji Tianqing put away his smile and said earnestly, "Before I arrived at the firmament continent, this continent was already in a state of panic, and every bush and tree was an enemy. Celestial King had long been mentally prepared. He even gathered all the troops and strictly defended. Therefore, when General Nan Feng attacked the Illusory Sun-blessed land, this seat directly showed up and didn't hide my tracks. Because even if this seat hid my tracks, it would be useless. As long as the Illusory Sun sect is safe and General Nan Feng and his 10,000 troops are killed, the Celestial King will be sure that this seat did it. Not only him, but all the powerhouses and forces in the firmament continent will be able to guess." The Illusory Sun sect master nodded to show that he understood and continued to listen. Ji Tianqing continued to explain, "Since this seat showed up openly, the Celestial King must be very anxious and worried. There are only two choices in front of him. One is to attack the Illusory Sun-blessed land with all his strength and try to kill this seat before this seat can gather his forces. The other is to bide his time and continue to strengthen the defense and wait for the final battle. However, the death of General Nan Fong and his 10,000 troops is a heavy loss to the Celestial King, and he has lost all his face. With his temperament, he would definitely not swallow this humiliation. He would definitely think of a way to retaliate and turn the tables. Only then would he be able to regain his prestige. If he doesn't dare to attack the illusory Sun sect and fight with this seat, then guess who he will attack. Hearing this, the illusory Sun sect master was stunned. Then his body shook and his eyes widened. Li clan, Fengshuan clan, Yinguang sect, and Shifeng pavilion. Celestial King will attack these four forces. Your Excellency is wise. This subordinate understands. Chapter 4289. The master of the illusory Sun sect was a smart man. Ji Tianqing gave him a little hint, and he immediately understood the reason. That's why my lord was able to guess Empyrean God King's next move with unparalleled wisdom. You guessed that the four forces were in danger, so you didn't stick to the old rules and didn't waste time. You met Li Yuan today. After the Li tribe swore their loyalty, you asked Li Yuan to leave and return to the Li tribe as soon as possible to prevent the Celestial King's sneak attack. Am I right? The master of the illusory Sun sect was not only smart, but also able to infer many things from one case. Ji Tianqing showed a gratified smile and nodded slightly. Yes, your guess is completely correct. But these are all my guesses. Currently, there is no definite news that the Celestial King sent troops to attack the four forces. Also, I have to wait here for the Fengshuan clan, the Yinguang sect, and the Shifeng pavilion master, so I can't leave for now. Otherwise, I don't mind personally dealing with the Celestial King's army. The master of the illusory Sun sect was a little shocked. It was from the bottom of his heart that he revered and worshipped Kenshin. He bowed deeply and said sincerely, "Thank you for your advice, sir. I've learned a lot." Ji Tianqing leaned on the armchair and looked out of the window with deep eyes. He said indifferently, "Ordinary people think that the final deciding factor of the battle between me and the Celestial King is the number of troops and experts. Or maybe it's my strength and methods. Actually, these aren't wrong, but they're not all right. The battle between me and the Celestial King is actually a competition of shrewdness and scheming. Whoever can predict the other's intentions and plan will have the upper hand. However, my strength and divine abilities are only enough to deter Empyrean God King from taking the risk." The master of the illusory Sun sect listened carefully and showed a thoughtful expression. He had a new understanding from Kenshin's words. As far as he knew, Kenshin was incomparably noble, powerful, and lofty. He would never waste words. And today, Kenshin was willing to talk to him alone for so long. This was undoubtedly a sign of his high regard and expectations for him. The master of the illusionary Sun sect had a hunch that Kenshin was deliberately cultivating him so that he could take over the power in the future and firmly control the firmament land. This made him inexplicably excited, but at the same time, he also felt a deep sense of pride and pressure. Fortunately, after Ji Tianqing said everything that needed to be said, he didn't make a long speech and had the illusory Sun sect master withdraw. The illusory Sun sect master left with joy and excitement to pass on the good news to Li Yuan. Ji Tianqing sat in the study, quietly flipping through ancient books. After waiting for about 15 minutes, the voice of the illusory Sun sect master came from outside the study. Reporting to Lord Kenshin, the leader of the Li clan, Li Yuan, is here. In fact, from the reception hall to Ji Tianqing's residence, it only took 100 breaths. The illusory Sun sect master must have instructed Li Yuan to wait for 15 minutes. Ji Tianqing put down the ancient book in his hand and said in a calm and dignified tone, "Come in, all of you." If he only said, "Come in," the illusory Sun sect master would definitely not enter the study and let Li Yuan go in alone to meet Kenshin. But Ji Tianqing said, "Come in," so he naturally led Li Yuan in. Li Yuan entered the study first with a heart full of longing and awe. He didn't dare to look at Kenshin's face and first bowed deeply and said in a respectful tone, "Subordinate Li Yuan greets Lord Kenshin." Well, another loyal subordinate who had long since made up his mind to be loyal to Kenshin. He hadn't even sworn his loyalty yet, but he already considered himself as a subordinate. The illusory Sun sect master followed him into the study and silently closed the door. He stood aside and didn't interrupt. Ji Tianqing looked at Li Yuan and smiled. "Li Yuan, this isn't the first time you've met me. Why are you so reserved?" Indeed, when Kenshin roamed the God realm 1,000 years ago, he traveled across the 5 continents, visited many blessed lands and ancient clans, and sparred with countless prodigies. The Li clan was no exception. Ji Tianqing stayed in the Li clan for 10 days and defeated 2 of their geniuses. He had naturally met Li Yuan before and had interacted with him. In fact, back then, the 2 of them didn't get along very well. The hot-tempered Li Yuan almost personally suppressed Kenshin. Later, it was a few elders who stopped and persuaded Li Yuan to calm things down. It was also because of this that Li Yuan was determined to be loyal to Kenshin. At the same time, when he wanted to meet Kenshin, he was especially nervous and guilty. Now that Ji Tianqing had exposed this layer of relationship, Li Yuan didn't hide it anymore. He raised his head and smiled awkwardly. After seeing Ji Tianqing's appearance clearly, he realized that Kenshin seemed to be younger than before. His appearance and temperament had also changed slightly. Of course, he had heard of the legend of Kenshin coming back from the dead and returning to his peak. He wasn't surprised by this. Seeing Kenshin's smiling face, he couldn't help but scratch his head. He said even more awkwardly, "Lord Kenshin, I am a rash and impulsive man. I almost offended you back then. Please forgive my unintentional actions." Li Yuan's personality was clearly exposed the moment he spoke. Unlike the illusory Sun sect's leader, who was experienced and calm, he was obviously a simple, straightforward, and rough man. Ji Tianqing naturally wouldn't bicker with him. He waved his hand and said with a smile, "Back then, I took the initiative to visit and challenge the Li clan's prodigies. 2 of the Li clan's prodigies were defeated by my sword. The Li clan's face couldn't be maintained. As the clan leader, it's reasonable that you want to stand up for your disciples. Fortunately, the Li clan's elders were more reasonable. I have no enmity with the Li clan, so I stopped you. In short, there's no need to mention what happened back then. I won't take it to heart. If it was someone with complicated thoughts, they might not believe Ji Tianqing's words and would respond carefully. But Li Yuan's mind was simple. He immediately let out a sigh of relief and hurriedly bowed with a smile. Seeing his reaction, Ji Tianqing thought to himself, "This brute is still the same as back then. Although he's a little stupid, he's not annoying." In order not to waste time, Ji Tianqing didn't reminisce with Li Yuan. He directly took out a jade slip and handed it to him. "You know the rules. If there are no problems, let's begin." Seeing the jade slip, Li Yuan's eyes lit up. He chuckled and said, "I traveled hundreds of millions of miles and rushed here in a hurry for this. The sooner I finish the process, the more at ease I can feel." Finished speaking, he began to recite the heavenly oath according to the contents of the jade slip. Half an hour later, the oath of surrender was finished. The oath took effect, and the familiar phenomenon appeared again. Ji Tianqing put away the jade slip and said to the relieved Li Yuan, "If there's nothing else, go back immediately and prepare for battle." Huh? Li Yuan was dumbfounded. Chapter 4290. Li Yuan was a little confused. He never thought that he would swear loyalty to Kenshin as soon as he arrived at illusory sun-blessed land. Before he could express his loyalty and intimacy to Kenshin, Kenshin wanted to drive him away. Wasn't this too fast? What did he do wrong? What did he do wrong? How could he make Kenshin hate him so much that he wanted to drive him away? Li Yuan was stunned. His expression was a little embarrassed, and his eyes revealed anxiety and helplessness. Although the illusory Sun Sect Master knew the reason, he quickly gave Li Yuan a look to calm down and not to worry about it. Unfortunately, Li Yuan was a reckless person. He couldn't even read the illusory Sun Sect Master's eyes. He stammered and wanted to plead with Ji Tianqing. Seeing Li Yuan's reaction, Ji Tianqing knew that he misunderstood. He explained, "Now that I'm in illusory sun-blessed land, the news has spread all over the firmament land. The Celestial King didn't dare to bring troops to besiege me, so he targeted the four forces, hoping to regain his face. At this time, I'm afraid that the elite troops sent by the Celestial King are on their way to the Li tribe. Why don't you go back to take charge of the situation? Why are you still here?" Facing a simple-minded person like Li Yuan, Ji Tianqing couldn't be secretive. He didn't want Li Yuan to misunderstand and cause more misunderstandings. He patiently explained a few words, and Li Yuan suddenly understood. He was suddenly full of worry and anxiety. This time, even without the illusory Sun Sect Master's persuasion, Li Yuan didn't want to stay. He quickly bowed to Ji Tianqing and left. "Your Excellency's great foresight is really admirable. I don't want to waste any more time. I'll go back to the Li tribe and resist the Celestial King's dogs with all my strength. Go." Ji Tianqing waved his hand and sent him away. Li Yuan was really swift and decisive. After leaving the study, he quickly found the two elders and took them out of illusory sun-blessed land. As soon as they got out of illusory sun-blessed land, the two elders were still confused and kept asking him what had happened. Li Yuan didn't answer. He first took out a communication jade slip and sent a message to the elders guarding the cave mansion, asking them to immediately close the entrance of the cave mansion to prevent a sneak attack. In addition, he also told the elders that the Celestial King might send elite troops to launch a sneak attack, so all the disciples of the clan should be on high alert. After giving these instructions, Li Yuan explained to the two elders beside him why he had hurried back. When the two elders arrived at illusory sun-blessed land, they didn't even see Kenshin's face before they had to return. Naturally, they were filled with disappointment and regret. However, after hearing Li Yuan's explanation and knowing the reason, they felt relieved. At the same time, they felt more and more admiration for Kenshin's divine foresight. Only Ji Tianqing and the illusory Sun Sect Master were left in the study. The illusory Sun Sect Master hesitated for a moment before tentatively asking, "Sir, should this subordinate send a message to the three patriarchs, Sect Master, and Pavilion Master and tell them about this matter?" In his opinion, since Kenshin had guessed that the Celestial King would send elite troops to attack the four forces, it was necessary to inform the four patriarchs and Sect Masters. Li Yuan already knew, but the other three patriarchs, Sect Master, and Pavilion Master were still in the dark. The illusory Sun Sect Master thought that he should inform the three patriarchs, Sect Master, and Pavilion Master as soon as possible so that they could take precautions in case the Celestial King succeeded. However, he was also worried that the three of them would immediately turn back after hearing that their base was being attacked. That would be too embarrassing. Therefore, after hesitating and weighing the pros and cons for a while, he asked Ji Tianqing for instructions. Ji Tianqing already had an answer, so he nodded without hesitation and said, "I'll leave this matter to you. Go ahead." The illusory Sun Sect Master secretly sighed in relief and hurriedly acknowledged the order, bowed, and left the study. He went to send a message to the three patriarchs, Sect Master, and Pavilion Master. Ji Tianqing also left the study and returned to the secret room to continue cultivating. During this period of time, he had already refined the quintessence fragments of General Nan Feng and the numerous God King experts in the distorted spacetime of Jiutian 10 Absolutes Tower. His strength was still steadily increasing and had already reached 51 times that of an ordinary peak God King. Unfortunately, the 5 God Emperors had yet to appear, and it was impossible for them to face him head-on in the short term. Therefore, he was still unable to verify his strength and realm, and how much of a gap there was between him and the 5 god emperors. Or perhaps, was there still a gap? Yun Yao and Ji Wuhan were naturally not in the house. They had already returned to the distorted spacetime to cultivate in seclusion. In fact, Ji Tianqing was the only one living in the house. This was also the reason why the 6th elder was puzzled as to why the Kenshin couple had not made a move for the past few days. On the other hand, Patriarch Feng Sun, Sect Master Yan Guang, and Pavilion Master Shifang had been rushing with all their might. They were not far from illusory sun-blessed land. They were filled with excitement and anticipation. They only wanted to reach illusory sun-blessed land as soon as possible and pledge their loyalty to Kenshin in person. In order to wait for the arrival of this day, they had endured for a long time and were on tenterhooks for several months. Now that their backer had finally arrived, their days of suffering would also be over. They were about to follow Kenshin to conquer the firmament mainland and usher in glory. However, just as the 3 experts were filled with fantasies, they suddenly received a message from Illusory Sun Sect Master. When they finished reading the message, they were stunned by the sudden bad news and felt uneasy. Empyrean God King had actually dispatched elite troops to attack their lair. Although they did not receive any information or clues, this was the result of Kenshin's speculation. They believed it without a doubt. As soon as they received the news, the 3 experts had the urge to turn around and return. They only wanted to go back and set up a defense against the Celestial King's lackeys as soon as possible. However, their rationality kept them calm and dispelled this idea. Not to mention that they had been rushing for several days and were finally about to reach illusory sun-blessed land. If they turned back now, they would not accomplish anything and would be wasting time. Most importantly, Kenshin was waiting for them in illusory sun-blessed land. If they turned around and left Kenshin in illusory sun-blessed land, how could they face Kenshin in the future? With Kenshin's ruthless, overbearing, and iron-blooded nature, they would not be able to get away with it easily. They were already like fire and water with Celestial King. They could not exist under the same sky. If they offended Kenshin again, they would not be able to please either side and could only wait for their deaths. After weighing the pros and cons, the 3 sect masters, Patriarch, and Pavilion Master made the same decision without any further discussion. That was, to continue to rush to illusory sun-blessed land. At the same time, they all sent a message back and ordered their disciples to close the entrance of the cave and guard against any sneak attacks by Celestial King subordinates. After the protectors and elders of the 3 forces received the message and immediately began to act, the 3 patriarchs, sect masters, and pavilion master were slightly relieved and continued their journey. End of chapter. Chapter 4291. After the illusory sun sect master sent the message to the 3 leaders, he had been in a state of anxiety. He knew that Lord Kenshin was a broad-minded person, so he wouldn't care too much. In fact, even if the people in charge of the 3 forces were really confused enough to turn around and return, the God of Swords would probably not be angry. But one thing was for sure, they would leave a bad impression on Kenshin. As a friend of many years, and as a colleague in the future, the illusory sun sect master didn't want the leaders of the 3 forces to be confused at this critical moment. Although he was a little selfish, he wasn't selfish. He had a big picture view. He knew that the most important thing now was to expand the forces under Kenshin, and the more forces that pledged their loyalty, the better. As long as Kenshin's forces grew stronger, they would be safer and have a better chance of conquering the entire firmament mainland. So, he sincerely hoped that there wouldn't be any changes in this matter. Fortunately, Feng Sun, Yan Guang, and Shifang Pavilion Master were all clear-headed and made the right choice. They all sent messages back to the illusory sun sect master, thanking him for the reminder and saying that they would continue to rush to illusory sun-blessed land. Also, they asked the illusory sun sect master to send their greetings to Kenshin and said that they would rush there as soon as possible. It was just some nonsense that didn't seem to be useful. But it was their attitude to show their determination to Kenshin. For days passed in a flash. On the morning of the 5th day, Feng Sun entered illusory sun blessed land. As usual, the illusory sun sect master received him personally and led him to see Ji Tianqing. Now that the situation was critical, everyone knew that Kenshin wouldn't wait for the three leaders to arrive and pledge their loyalty together. Whoever arrived at the illusory sun blessed land first would be brought over by the illusory sun sect master to swear allegiance to the sword god. The process was short. From Feng Sun Mia entering illusory sun blessed land to seeing Kenshin, pledging his loyalty, and leaving, it only took half an hour. After the heavenly oath was made, Feng Sun Mia felt relieved. After leaving illusory sun blessed land, he brought the elders with him and rushed back as fast as possible. In the evening, Shifang Pavilion Master also arrived at illusory sun blessed land. Just like Feng Sun Mia, he was led by the illusory sun clan master to meet the Kenshin. After swearing his loyalty, he left in a hurry. After a night, on the morning of the 6th day, sect master Yan Guang finally arrived. The previous scene played out again, with the same procedure and speed. Before they came, Feng Sunmi, Shifang Pavilion Master, and Yan Guang's sect master had already thought about how to get close to Kenshin and how to show their loyalty and talent. But in this situation, they couldn't care less about showing off themselves. They could only focus on the big picture. Since they were already Kenshin's subordinates, there would be plenty of time for them to interact and perform. Of course, when the three experts left, they still harbored a trace of hope and expectation in their hearts. They were worried about their gains and losses. They were all thinking, what if they could not withstand the elite troops sent by the Celestial King with their own strength? Will Kenshin-sama just sit back and do nothing? If Lord Kenshin wanted to help, he would have to rescue the four forces scattered across the firmament land. No matter how powerful Kenshin was, he wouldn't be able to split himself up. But if Kenshin didn't help, they would be killed by the Celestial King's subordinates. Wouldn't that be too unjust? With such a feeling of anxiety, the four clan masters went back home. At the same time, in the illusory sun blessed land. The illusory sun clan master was summoned by Ji Tianqing and went to his study room to meet him. After saluting, the illusory sun clan master asked, "Sir, what can I do for you?" Ji Tianqing sat in the armchair with an ancient scroll in his hand. He looked thoughtful and said calmly, "Now that the situation in the firmament land has become chaotic, the battle between me and the Celestial King has officially begun." But he turned a blind eye to the chaos in the four regions and had no intention of sending troops to help. His idea was clear. He wanted to concentrate his forces and defend the heaven capital. At the same time, he wanted to find an opportunity to send out elite troops to destroy my forces. The hundreds of millions of people in the firmament land and many top forces and ancient clans are watching our every move. The next development of the situation will affect their choice. So, the Li clan, the Fengshuan clan, the Yanguang sect, and the Shifang Pavilion can't be lost. The illusory Sun clan master was smart and understood what he meant. "Sir, do you mean that we have to support the four forces to fight against the army sent by the Celestial King? If so, I'm willing to lead the disciples of the illusory Sun clan to follow your orders." Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said, "The illusory Sun clan just went through a big battle. The disciples need to rest and recover their strength. It's not suitable for them to go out in the short term. I have to deal with the army sent by the Celestial King to achieve a shocking effect. Of course, you don't have to worry that the Celestial King will send another army to attack the illusory Sun-blessed land after I leave. I'll leave a doppelganger here. I think the Celestial King won't dare to invade." The illusory Sun clan master had thought about this problem before. With his intelligence, he had already guessed that Kenshin would personally take action. At that time, he was worried that if Kenshin left the illusory sun-blessed land, the Celestial King would most likely send an army to attack. After all, the Celestial King had enough experts and soldiers under his command. He could divide his forces and find an opportunity to attack. However, he worried too much. Kenshin had already considered this possibility and thought of a solution. Indeed, as long as Kenshin left a doppelganger here and showed up at the right time, the Celestial King would misjudge the situation. When the real Kenshin helped the four forces fight against the enemy, the Celestial King would see through Kenshin's scheme. But by then, it would be too late. Moreover, the Celestial King might not have the courage to lead an army to attack Kenshin's doppelganger. "My lord, you're so thoughtful and meticulous. I'm impressed." The Illusory Sun clan master bowed and said sincerely, "But I still have a question. I have to ask my lord to enlighten me. The Li clan, Fengshuan clan, Yinguang sect, and Shifang pavilion are far away from each other. They are scattered all over the continent. Even if you personally take action, you won't be able to split yourself and save the four forces in time." Ji Tianqing smiled playfully and said, "Since I can leave a doppelganger here, I can send more doppelganger to save the four forces at the same time." The Illusory Sun clan master's body shook, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. In the knowledge of all god kings, the main body and doppelganger could not be too far apart. If they were more than 100 million miles apart, it would be difficult to control the doppelganger, not to mention the doppelganger's combat power. However, Kenshin's words meant that he could control several doppelganger at the same time from a few billion miles away. It was unbelievable. Chapter 4292. The more time he spent with Kenshin, the more the Illusory Sun sect master was unable to see through the other party's realm, cultivation, and methods. While he was still in shock, Ji Tianqing ordered, "Also, there's one more thing I need you to do. As for the secluded and neutral factions and ancient clans, I asked you to compile a list of names and information on them. Have you finished it?" The Illusory Sun sect master came back to his senses and replied with an awkward expression, "Reporting to my lord, it's already 90% done. There's still about 10% left, and it'll be done by tomorrow at the latest." Ji Tianqing didn't criticize him and nodded slightly, "Send the list over after you're done, and then send out invitations to those factions in your own name. Let them understand my intentions and attitude, and do your best to persuade them to join the rebel alliance and participate in this grand undertaking. Whether it's coercion, bribery, or swindling, you can do it to your heart's content." In short, Ji Tianqing wanted the Illusory Sun sect master to recruit and persuade more people to join him as soon as possible. However, those coercion and swindling methods were only suitable for the Illusory Sun sect master to use. He definitely couldn't use them. It was too degrading. The Illusory Sun sect master understood Ji Tianqing's meaning, but he couldn't go along with it. He said with a smile, "Rest assured, my lord, this subordinate knows what to do. Moreover, the leaders of those clans and factions all revere and worship you. It's just that due to many reasons, they can't contact you for the time being and can't pledge their loyalty to you. As long as this subordinate sends them a message and invites them, there's no need to use coercion or bribery at all. They'll rush to pledge their loyalty to you." The Illusory Sun sect master's words were very beautiful, and Ji Tianqing was very pleased. Although the two of them knew that these words were mostly true and that it wasn't that simple to subdue those clans and factions. However, this didn't affect a capable minister who was good at flattery, and said the right words at the right time. "Go." Ji Tianqing waved his hand and had the Illusory Sun sect master withdraw. Then, he used the 10-direction vanishing shadows and created 4 doppelgangers. One of the doppelgangers stayed in the house and meditated in a secret room. His original body and the other 3 doppelgangers quietly left Illusory Sun Paradise and rushed to the 4 factions. Before leaving, Ji Tianqing had a route map in his mind. With Emperor God King's Jiandu as the center, there would be 4 different routes to send troops to the Li clan, Feng Sun clan, and the other 2 clans. Among the 4 routes, the shortest distance to the Ten Pavilion was the furthest was to the Ten Pavilion. In other words, Emperor God King's troops would take several days to arrive at the 4 factions. There was a distance 10 direction vanishing shadow sun sect pavilions to the 10 to sect to the 4 factions to several days. After analyzing and weighing the pros and cons, he made a decision. 10's 10 sects 2's to the 10 to the clan S to the clans. His original body would take the deity-slaying battleship and rush to the 10 direction pavilion. If the Celestial King's troops attacked the moment they arrived at the destination. With this arrangement, his 3 doppelgangers would be able to arrive before the 2 sides fought, or even during the battle, and provide support. The 10 direction pavilion was an exception. If he sent his doppelgangers to provide support, the 10 direction pavilion would have been destroyed by the Celestial King's troops by the time his doppelgangers arrived. That was why his original body would go there personally. The White Dragon drove the deity-slaying battleship at twice the speed of light, consuming tens of millions of resources every hour. It carried Ji Tianqing to the 10 direction pavilion. If his doppelgangers went there, it would take at least 7 days. But the deity-slaying battleship only needed 2 days to arrive. Even though Ji Tianqing was able to predict Emperor God King's plans with incredible foresight, Emperor God King's plans were still a mystery to him. But he was not omnipotent. His plans and arrangements were for the 4 armies to attack as soon as they arrived at their target. But in reality, the troops led by the 8 celestial generals arrived at the destination one after another, but they did not start the battle immediately. They kept in mind the Celestial King's instructions and tried their best to find an opportunity to launch a sneak attack using conspiracies. They wanted to destroy the target as quickly as possible at the lowest cost. 2 days later, Ji Tianqing arrived at the most remote 10 direction pavilion on the deity-slaying battleship. Interestingly, the 10 direction pavilion master was still on his way back. Conservatively speaking, he would only be back in about 9 days. At this time, the 2 celestial generals under the Celestial King led 30 celestial kings and 9,000 Sir God Masters to arrive at the 10 direction pavilion on 3 deity ships. The fleet stopped outside the entrance of the 10 direction pavilion, hid their tracks and auras, and lay in wait quietly. The 2 celestial generals sent out a dozen celestial kings and a large number of scouts to investigate the situation at the 10 direction pavilion, preparing to carry out a conspiracy. Ji Tianqing put away the deity-slaying battleship and remained invisible. After circling around the area, he easily saw through the fleet's disguise. Seeing that the other side did not move, he was not in a hurry to attack. Instead, he observed the situation in the dark. On the 3rd day, Ji Tianqing's 2 doppelgangers arrived at the abodes of the Li clan and the Feng Sun clan. At this time, the 2 troops sent by the Celestial King were still half a day away from arriving. Ji Tianqing's doppelgangers arrived before them. Of course, Li Yuan and Feng Sunmi were still on their way back. They would arrive in about 3 days. On the 4th day, Ji Tianqing's 3rd doppelganger finally arrived at the Yanguang sect. At the same time, the 2 celestial generals in charge of attacking the Yanguang sect arrived with 9,000 troops. The current situation was very delicate. Except for the forces under Ji Tianqing and the experts under the Celestial King, no one knew that a terrible war was about to break out on the seemingly peaceful firmament land. After the 4 troops arrived at their destination, they did not move and silently waited for an opportunity. Ji Tianqing and his 3 doppelgangers were also very patient. They were waiting to see what tricks the other side was up to. The clan leaders, suzerains, and pavilion masters of the 4 forces were still in the dark. They hurried on with anxious hearts. In order to not expose his whereabouts and plan, Ji Tianqing did not tell the clan leaders and suzerains that he and his doppelgangers had arrived. He wanted to strike at the right time and give the 4 troops a heavy blow. Only then could he shock the world. The Celestial King stayed in Heaven Capital and remotely controlled the 4 troops through intelligence and communication. He also monitored the situation in the illusionary sun-blessed land. Up until now, the Celestial King still thought that Kenshin was still in the illusionary sun-blessed land and did not know his plan and conspiracy. Because just yesterday, scouts and spies sent news that Kenshin was still in the illusionary sun-blessed land and was explaining to several young immortal kings. When he heard the news, the Celestial King sneered and sneered. In his opinion, Kenshin was too arrogant and complacent. He wanted to win people's hearts but did not know that a disaster was coming. Chapter 4293. Kenshin, who was guarding illusory sun-blessed land, was naturally Ji Tianqing's avatar. The so-called explanation to the young divine kings was nothing more than a smokescreen set up by Ji Tianqing and illusory sun sect master to show their faces in front of everyone. And within illusory sun sect, there must be spies and insiders sent by the Celestial King. This was something that both Ji Tianqing and illusory sun sect master knew. The reason why illusory sun sect master was not in a hurry to get rid of the spies was because he wanted to wait for the spies to pass the news that Kenshin was still in illusory sun-blessed land to the Celestial King. One day later, he secretly ordered a few elders to start screening and investigating, vowing to find the spies of the Celestial King. At this time, the 4 armies dispatched by Empyrean God King had rested for a day, investigated the situation of the 4 factions, and then began their assault. The first army to attack was ordered to attack the Li tribe's cave dwelling. No one knew what methods they used, or what information they received, but they actually found out that Li Yuan was not in the Li tribe's cave dwelling. Since the Li tribe's leader was not there, it was the best time for them to attack. Even though the Li tribe's cave dwelling was tightly shut, and the defensive formation was strengthened, this army was not afraid. 3 divine warships arranged themselves in a formation and fired their cannons first, blasting out hundreds of dazzling divine power light pillars. Immediately after, 2 divine craftsmen led 30 divine king generals and 9,000 elite divine monarchs to attack without any regard for their own safety. They used all their strength to attack the entrance of the Li tribe's cave dwelling with all their might, vowing to break through the cave dwelling in the shortest time possible. However, the Li tribe elders, deacons, and disciples in the cave dwelling were already prepared. Thousands of disciples gathered at the entrance of the cave dwelling, forming a battle formation and casting spells to increase the power of the defensive formation. Even though the enemy's attack was fierce, the cannon fire was extremely intense. The defensive formation of the Li tribe's cave dwelling was bombarded until it flashed with divine light and overflowed with energy. There were even cracks. But with the support of the Li tribe disciples, the defensive formation did not fall, and the cracks were quickly repaired. The 9,000 troops led by the 2 divine generals had been attacking for 2 hours, expending a lot of energy and divine power, and their battle power was greatly reduced. But the defensive formation of the Li tribe's cave dwelling was still intact, and the cracks that had appeared were all repaired. Apart from the defensive formation's energy being depleted, nothing else had changed. This result made the 2 divine blacksmiths and the 9,000 soldiers feel very uncomfortable, and they felt great pressure. Divine king generals, cursing and cursing angrily. Those damned lowly Li clan people, they must have received the news long ago, so they are all hiding in their caves. Our whereabouts are very well hidden. Just based on the Li tribe's intelligence network, it is impossible for them to discover us. Who leaked our whereabouts? Sun SSSSS cave dwellings is. Our whereabouts and plans have been exposed. If we delay for another day or 2, I'm afraid that there will be more variables. To see if lords, ofs. Originally, they were here to ambush the Li tribe. If the Li tribe had not sensed the danger, the cave dwelling's entrance would still be open, and there would be 100 guards guarding it. These divine king generals, with 9,000 divine monarchs, would be able to easily break into the Li tribe's cave dwelling. But the Li tribe had holed themselves up in the cave dwelling, relying on the defensive formation. This was a headache. The divine king generals went to consult the 2 divine generals, and everyone discussed a plan. The 9,000 divine monarchs were still attacking, and they did not dare to stop. But at this moment, Ji Tianxing, who had been hiding in the dark, finally made his move. Sword rain. He, who was invisible, quietly entered the formation of the 9,000 troops, and used his trump card. Following his shout, tens of thousands of stars appeared in the sky, and they poured down like a meteor shower. The 9,000 troops that were busy attacking the Li tribe's cave dwelling suddenly felt something was wrong, and they subconsciously looked up at the sky. The 30 divine king generals and the 2 divine generals also looked up at the sky. Everyone then saw clearly that it was not a meteor shower, but 90,000 starry swords. Each starry sword was 10,000 feet long, and they carried a terrifying sword intent that could destroy everything, and they instantly fell on top of their heads. Danger! Dodge! At this moment of life and death, the 2 divine generals shouted, instructing the soldiers to dodge the starry swords. But unfortunately, the 9,000 troops were too weak, and their reaction was not fast enough. Before the starry swords could touch them, they were suppressed by the invisible sword intent and power, and they could not move at all. Even if some people struggled with all their might, they could barely escape a few dozen miles away, but their speed was too slow. In the next moment, under the horrified and despairing expressions of the army of 9,000, 90,000 star swords poured down and drowned an area of 20,000 miles in radius. Boom! 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 There was an earth-shattering explosion. An area of 20,000 miles was turned into an endless sea of starlight, and billions of divine light shards burst out. Countless Sir God experts were smashed into pieces after being hit by the starry swords, and blood and flesh splattered everywhere. Even the lower and middle divine king generals were mercilessly killed by the starry swords. A few of them died on the spot, but most of them were severely injured, and they were howling miserably. Only the 2 divine generals of the upper divine king realm were able to dodge in time, and they escaped to the edge of the sword light. The 2 of them tried their best, and they used all their trump cards and divine weapons to block the starry swords. In this way, the 2 of them blocked most of the starry swords, and they were only hit by a dozen starry swords, and their injuries were not serious. In the blink of an eye, the first round of the 90,000 starry swords ended. 30,000 starry swords collapsed, and they turned into a torrent of starlight that dissipated between heaven and earth. The remaining 60,000 starry swords intertwined into a sword formation of 20,000 miles, and they were desperately killing the enemy in the formation. The 9,000 soldiers suffered heavy casualties, and more than 3,000 of them lost their lives in the first round of attack. The remaining 5,000 soldiers did not even have time to react before they were killed by the starry swords, and they screamed miserably again. 6 out of the 30 divine king realm generals were killed as well. The remaining 24 were either lightly or severely injured. Seeing the heavy casualties of the army, they were filled with grief and anger, and their hearts were filled with anger. It was a pity that they could not even protect themselves, and they did not have the time to help the dying army. As for the 2 divine craftsmen, they had escaped from the sword formation at the cost of their bodies being covered with wounds. Seeing the soldiers under their command being slaughtered in the sword formation, they were so angry that their eyes almost popped out of their sockets, but there was nothing they could do. Chapter 4294. Swoosh! 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 Tens of thousands of starry giant swords formed a sword array that lasted for 5 breaths of time before it ran out of energy and dissipated. When the stars in the sky dissipated and the battlefield regained its clarity, more than half of the 9,000 soldiers had died. More than 5,000 people died tragically in the sword array. They were smashed into pieces by the starry giant swords and died without a complete corpse. More than 1,000 people were severely injured. They were either covered in blood or had lost their limbs. They could barely fight anymore. Only 2,000 lucky Divine Lord experts had suffered light injuries. Although they looked to be in a sorry state, they could still continue fighting. As for the 30 King God Realm generals, 12 of them were killed by the sword array. 11 of them were severely injured. Only 7 of them were lightly injured. Seeing such a tragic ending, the 2 immortal generals almost couldn't believe their eyes. They were a little stunned. They really couldn't imagine who could perform such a terrifying divine ability and defeat their army in such a short time, causing them to suffer heavy casualties. Could it be the Li tribe who set up the array in advance? No. The 2 divine generals were sure that they did not trigger any array. Moreover, the appearance of the 90,000 starry giant swords was strange and sudden. There was no sign at all. After analyzing it, they were sure that it was a superpower and not a divine array. That was the problem. Just how terrifyingly strong was this expert to be able to display such a heaven-defying divine ability? Even a peak divine king could not do it. When this thought flashed through their minds, the 2 divine generals looked at each other and came up with the same idea at the same time. Their faces were filled with horror. Kenshin. In the current firmament land, perhaps only the sword god had such extraordinary strength and means. Thinking that it was Kenshin who did it, the 2 divine generals trembled. Fear surged in their hearts. However, they immediately calmed down and eliminated this thought. No, it can't be Kenshin. Kenshin was still in illusory sun paradise yesterday. How could he be here? Since they eliminated the possibility of Kenshin, the 2 divine generals had new doubts. Besides Kenshin, who else would help the Li tribe and have such superpower? The 2 divine generals were still deep in thought. The 18 surviving divine kings and 3,000 soldiers retreated to the edge of the ruins. It was impossible to attack the Li tribe's cave abode. With their defeated army, it was impossible to break the Li tribe's defensive array. Moreover, even if they broke the array and entered the Li tribe's cave abode, they might not be able to defeat the thousands of Li tribe disciples. The most important thing was to retreat and recover. However, the heaven-destroying sword formation was only the beginning of the massacre. Just as the 3 divine generals retreated, a few sword rays of light suddenly in the sky and slashed towards the 3 divine ships. Of the 3 divine generals. Swish! 9 dazzling golden swords streaked across the sky like bolts of lightning and instantly struck the 3 divine warships. Even though the 3 divine warships had been on guard for a long time and were on high alert. However, they were inanimate objects after all. They needed someone to control them, so it was impossible for them to have the reaction speed of a God King expert. The person operating the divine warship sensed the incoming sword light, but it was too late for him to dodge. Swish! 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 The 3 godly warships were cut in half at the waist. Countless pieces of metal splashed out and were swept away in all directions by the violent airwaves. Thud! Kaboom! Amidst the deafening noise, the 2 halves of the divine warships fell from the sky and crashed into the ruins, splashing up yellow dust all over the sky. The 3 divine ships were destroyed just like that. The dozens of Sir God experts in charge of controlling the divine ships were either dead or injured. The 3,000 soldiers who were retreating were stunned. They stared at this scene with their mouths agape. An indescribable fear rose in their hearts. They had suffered such heavy casualties. Even the divine ship was destroyed. They had lost their means of escape. Yet, they did not even know who had attacked. Panic spread and spread. The 3,000 soldiers could not help but scream and scream. They sped up and fled into the distance. Without a divine ship to ride, they would rather fly. They had to leave this terrifying place as soon as possible. The 3,000 soldiers were in chaos. They fled in all directions in panic. The two divine generals hurriedly shouted and ordered everyone to stop. Unfortunately, only a portion of the soldiers obeyed. They stopped anxiously and waited for the two divine generals' orders. The other half of the soldiers were already panicking and out of their wits. They ignored the two divine generals' orders and fled into the distance with all their might. They dove into the sea of clouds. Don't panic. Immediately get into formation and face the enemy. Stay alert. The enemy is lying in ambush. We cannot panic. Otherwise, if we give the enemy an opportunity, our casualties will increase. The two divine generals ordered the remaining 1,000 soldiers to quickly get into formation. They searched the surroundings cautiously for traces of the attacker. However, they spread out their divine senses and searched a radius of 70,000 miles. They did not find anything out of the ordinary. The two divine generals found the situation increasingly strange. They led the soldiers and retreated into the distance at a moderate pace. However, thousands of golden sword lights lit up in the sky and fell down like a heavy downpour. Swish! 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 More than 9,000 golden sword lights descended and immediately formed a sword formation that covered a radius of 10,000 miles. It enveloped the 1,000 soldiers. The two divine generals and the soldiers were shocked. They thought the golden sword lights would kill them too. But in reality, the sword lights were only used to form a sword formation to seal them. They did not kill them. Swish! Just as everyone was filled with fear and panic, a handsome and valiant figure appeared in the sky above their heads. It was a young man in a white robe. He had an extraordinary demeanor and exuded a domineering aura that looked down on the world. Immediately, everyone's eyes gathered on him. After seeing his appearance clearly, everyone's bodies stiffened, and their expressions became extremely unsightly, revealing dense fear and despair in their eyes. Kenshin. He's Kenshin. Kenshin attacked us. No wonder. This is impossible. Kenshin is clearly an illusory sun-blessed land. How could he appear here? This must be an illusion. Don't be scared. Although the other party was alone, they had more than 1,000 soldiers on their side. But the other party was Kenshin. He was a supreme elite who could block 1,000,000 soldiers with a single sword strike. Therefore, the two divine generals and more than 1,000 soldiers were so scared that their faces turned pale and their hearts were filled with fear. Of course, many divine kings were able to remain calm despite their fear. They hurriedly sent out communication jade slips to inform the celestial king. It seemed that it was a foregone conclusion that they would be killed by Kenshin. However, if they could spread the news that Kenshin had saved the Li tribe, their deaths would be worth it. Chapter 4295. However, many god kings fearlessly sent out transmission jade slips, only to discover that the jade slips could not break the seal, let alone send out a message. The two god generals took out their special transmission jade slips and were about to send out a message. However, several sword lights descended from the sky and accurately destroyed the transmission jade slips in their hands. Fortunately, they dodged quickly, or their arms would have been smashed to pieces by the sword lights. The two god generals immediately understood that Kenshin had been watching them. If they made any strange movements, Kenshin would mercilessly kill them. In their fear, the two god generals did not dare to act rashly. They could only tightly grip their sabers and stare at the Kenshin in the sky. Of course, with their strength, they could not tell whether the Kenshin in the sky was a clone or the actual body. Ji Tianqing's clone did not waste any words with them. He directly used his ultimate skill and launched an attack. Heavenly Dragon Palm. God-slaying sword. His left hand struck out with a dragon-shaped palm shadow, while his right hand waved the divine sword, sending out dozens of dazzling sword lights. Although the 1,000-odd soldiers were on guard, they were sealed in the sword formation and had no room to dodge. They could only use their full strength to defend. Bam! 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 Rumble! The dazzling palm shadows slammed into the crowd with deafening booms. The dazzling golden sword lights slashed into the crowd, causing blood and flesh to splatter everywhere. The 1,000-odd soldiers were slaughtered, suffering heavy casualties. Nearly half of the soldiers were blasted to pieces by the palm shadows and sword lights. Even their godheads collapsed. The other half of the soldiers were lucky enough to block the palm shadows and sword lights. They did not lose their lives on the spot, but they still suffered injuries of varying degrees. Even the two strongest divine generals were disheveled and embarrassed. Before the soldiers could gather and launch a counterattack, Ji Tianqing unleashed another devastating divine ability at the soldiers. This time, the divine ability he unleashed was not only the overwhelming sword lights, but also flames, lightning, and all kinds of pillars of light that blotted out the sky. The two god generals came back to their senses and hurriedly commanded the hundreds of soldiers to work together to defend. Hundreds of god kings and god sovereigns cast their arts with all their might despite their fear. They unleashed dazzling five-colored divine art images. The spells and abilities unleashed by the two sides clashed violently in the air, resulting in a deafening boom. Bam! 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 Boom! Rumble! A series of loud, muffled sounds reverberated between heaven and earth. However, the divine abilities of the hundreds of soldiers were no match for the divine abilities of Ji Tianqing's clone. In the blink of an eye, more than 200 people were blown to smithereens in the dazzling sword light, lightning, and fire, dying on the spot. The soldiers of the two god generals panicked, trying to find a way to escape from the sword formation. While blocking the attacks of Ji Tianqing's clone, they checked the structure of the sword formation, hoping to find a flaw and escape. However, they needed time to find a flaw, and even more time to break the formation. During this long period of time, Ji Tianqing's clone continued to attack, gradually killing the hundreds of soldiers. 15 minutes later, the battle came to an end, and the hundreds of soldiers were killed. Only the two god generals and a few heavily injured god kings were left, struggling to hold on. However, their morale and spirit had collapsed, and their strength was almost exhausted. They knew that they could not hold on for much longer before being killed by Kenshin. Before they died, the two god generals were filled with unwillingness. They shouted at Ji Tianqing's clone, Kenshin. If you're still a supreme, then let us die with a clear understanding. You were in illusory sun-blessed land, so why are you here? Our whereabouts and plans were very secretive, so how did you know we were here? If they could not figure this out, the two god generals would not die in peace. Ji Tianqing's clone did not hide anything, and sneered, "Don't suspect anything, there are no spies or insiders who leaked any information to me." I deduced that he would do this based on Empyrean God King's nature. Not only you, but also the Li tribe. The other three forces will also be attacked. I predicted the enemy's move, so I sent my clone to rescue you. Now, do you understand? Hearing this, the two god generals were filled with shock and disbelief. After being stunned for a long time, the two of them nodded blankly and smiled bitterly. I see. The battle between powerhouses is never a battle of strength, but more of a battle of wits. It seems like Celestial King has lost. Huh, so it was not Kenshin who defeated us, but only his clone. The two god generals were in complete despair. One of Kenshin's clones was enough to destroy their 9,000-strong army. It was not hard to imagine that the other three forces would not fare any better. In short, Celestial King's plan was a complete failure. The two god generals understood the cause and effect, and had no more regrets. Ji Tianqing did not waste any more words with them, and attacked again, using all kinds of skills. Boom! 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 With a series of loud explosions, the two god generals and a few god kings were drowned in lightning and sword radiance. Soon, everyone was blasted into smithereens and turned into ashes. 100 breaths later, Ji Tianqing's clone removed the sword formation, picked up the godhead fragments and rings of the god kings, and flew away. This was despite the fact that he had only killed over 7,000 of the 9,000 soldiers in this army. The other 1,000 soldiers had already scattered and fled, and no one knew where they went. But he did not plan to chase after them, and let them escape to pass the news to Celestial King. At the same time, outside the cave abodes of the other three forces, the battle was also ongoing. The second force to be attacked was the Fengshuan clan. Two god generals led the 9,000-strong army to attack the cave abodes of the Fengshuan clan. They originally wanted to use some tricks to sneak into the cave abodes of the Fengshuan clan, and then take the opportunity to cause trouble and sneak attack. But the Fengshuan clan received the news in advance, and closed the entrance of the cave abodes, and gathered all their forces to guard the defensive formation. The army had no choice but to attack the entrance of the cave abodes of the Fengshuan clan, and attack the defensive formation with all their might. Ji Tianqing's clone was not in a hurry to attack. He waited for the army to attack continuously for 4 hours, and when they had exhausted a lot of their energy and relaxed their spirits, then he attacked. The same thing happened again. Ji Tianqing's clone still used the sword rain, and 90,000 starry giant swords bombarded the 9,000-strong army. After a few breaths, the sword rain and strangulation ended, and more than 3,000 of the 9,000-strong army were killed. The remaining 5,000 people were still in shock, and they were filled with panic. At this time, Ji Tianqing's clone appeared again, and used the heaven-destroying sword formation to seal the entire army. Chapter 4296. The battle at the Fengshuan clan side was not over yet. Ji Tianqing's doppelganger was still casting spells to seal and kill the remaining troops. On the other side, the third troop launched an attack on the Yanguang sect. The mental journey and encounters of these troops were highly similar. They wanted to find an opportunity to plot or sneak into the target's cave abode to cause trouble. However, the target had closed the cave abode's entrance and was in a defensive posture, making it impossible for them to attack. They could not come up with a good idea, but they had to carry out the Celestial King's orders. In the end, they could only attack forcefully with the intention of breaking through the cave abode's entrance and killing their way inside. However, each cave abode was the foundation of each clan and sect. After more than 10,000 years of accumulation and reinforcement, its defensive power was very strong. Even if the three troops attacked at all costs, it was impossible to break through quickly. When the three troops were exhausted and had to rest and relax, Ji Tianqing's doppelganger attacked decisively. It was the same formula, the same process, and the same result. First, he used the sword rain technique to kill the three troops with thousands of swords. They were stunned and suffered heavy casualties. Then, Ji Tianqing's doppelganger used the heaven punishment sword formation to trap the remaining troops and kill them one by one. In order to frighten the enemy and create more opportunities to attack, his doppelganger would appear openly. When the three troops saw his doppelganger, they were dumbfounded and completely confused. Everyone knew that Kenshin was in illusory sun paradise. How could he appear here? It must be an illusion. Something must have gone wrong somewhere. The successive shocks made the three troops' emotions and state of mind fluctuate. They were confused for a while and their combat power naturally weakened. Ji Tianqing's three doppelganger could act independently and did not affect each other. Therefore, in just half a day, the three troops attacked the target one after another but were all stopped by his doppelganger. In the end, the three troops were destroyed by Ji Tianqing's doppelganger. Ji Tianqing's doppelganger collected the spoils of war and left quietly. Until now, the patriarchs and sect masters of the three clans and sects were still on their way back. After the battle, the elders and disciples of the three clans and sects were all in a state of confusion. There was clearly an army attacking their cave abode, and it had been going on for 4 to 6 hours. Why did the army stop attacking midway and even retreat? Did the situation change? Or did reinforcements come to their aid and defeat the enemy? Filled with confusion and anxiety, the people of the three families and sects performed their secret techniques to find out what was going on outside the cave. When they saw the situation outside, the elders and deacons who were casting the spell were stunned. For some reason, tens of thousands of miles around the cave dwelling had been reduced to ruins. The violent power and aura left behind by the great battle were still reverberating between heaven and earth. Furthermore, the ground was littered with the wreckage of warships, the fragments of weapons and armors, as well as the corpses of countless enemies. The elders and deacons told everyone what they had seen, but no one believed them. In the end, the people of the three clans and sects gathered their courage and opened the exit of the cave abode. Many elders and deacons personally went to the scene to check. When they confirmed that the enemy troops who had attacked them had indeed been destroyed, everyone was so shocked that they were unable to control themselves. They were also filled with confusion. They couldn't make up their minds and didn't know what to do, so they reported the news to the patriarchs and sect masters. The three patriarchs and sect masters who were rushing back received the message from the elders not long ago. They knew that the cave abode had been attacked by the army sent by the Celestial King, and they were all worried. At this time, they received another message saying that the army had been attacking for 4 to 6 hours and had been inexplicably annihilated. The first reaction of the three patriarchs and sect masters was, "Are you kidding me? There was no other way." There was only a difference of 6 hours, but the contents of the two messages were completely different. It was too absurd. However, after the three patriarchs and sect masters came back to their senses, they calmed down. They believed that the elders and deacons wouldn't dare to deceive them. The news must be true. Then, who helped them resolve the crisis and annihilate the enemy? The answer was obvious. In the firmament land, under the current situation, who had the courage to save them? Who had the strength to annihilate thousands of troops in such a short time? Except for Kenshin, there was no one else. But the problem was that Kenshin was in the illusionary sun paradise. When they left the illusionary sun paradise, Kenshin hadn't left yet. What was going on? Li Yuan, Feng Sunmi, and sect master Yen Guang were a little confused. On the way back, they analyzed for a long time but couldn't find a more reasonable answer. After a long time of hesitation and struggle, they gathered their courage and sent a message to Kenshin, asking if it was Kenshin who had saved them. When Ji Tianqing received the message from the three patriarchs and sect masters, he was outside the entrance of the Shifeng pavilion, staring at the army that hadn't moved. He thought that the other three armies had already attacked the target. How could the army outside the Shifeng pavilion be so calm? However, this army might have received some news and knew what happened to the other three armies. After hiding for a day, they didn't even have the courage to attack the Shifeng pavilion. They hurriedly boarded the battleship and turned around to escape. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing knew that the news of the three armies' annihilation had spread. Of course, he couldn't let this army go. He hurriedly performed the sword rain and summoned 90,000 starry giant swords to kill the three godly battleships and the 9,000 soldiers. The army was lining up to board the battleship. They didn't expect the sword rain to fall from the sky. Their eyes were filled with fear and panic. Everyone shouted, roared, and scattered to escape and hide. But it was useless. The 90,000 starry giant swords fell in the blink of an eye. With a loud rumble, the three godly battleships and the 9,000 soldiers were drowned by the sword light. Even though the generals in the Immortal King realm and the masters operating the godly battleships cast spells in time to block the sword light. But the power of the sword rain was too terrifying. In the blink of an eye, the 3 godly battleships were blasted into smithereens by the sword light. They turned into countless pieces of wreckage and scattered in the ruins. The 9,000 soldiers were also scattered. At least 3,000 people died on the spot and turned into ashes. The 5,000 people who survived also suffered light or heavy injuries. They were filled with fear and panic as they fled without any order. The 2 god generals were also very fearful and anxious, but they had to calm down. They issued all kinds of orders and commanded the soldiers to work together to resist. At this moment, Ji Tianqing performed the heaven-destroying sword formation again and sealed the surviving army. He appeared in the sky openly and looked down at the army with an indifferent expression. More than 5,000 people looked up at him. After seeing his face clearly, they were completely flustered. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.